Good afternoon. I'd like to call this city meeting to order. My name is Chris Leak. I'm chair of the City County and Planning Board. Would everyone please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So for our meeting today on March the 9th, I wanted to start out for historians in the room to let you know that we are celebrating our 75th anniversary of the City County Planning Board. It is the oldest City County Planning Board in North Carolina, formed in 1948. So our staff, thank you again for all that you do to make it great, to pass planning board chairs, Paul Norby, all of the others who I can't call. We want to thank you for all of your hard work to make the planning board what it is today. Today's meeting is being broadcast live on TV 13 and will be rebroadcast at 10 a.m. Friday morning and again at 4 p.m. Sunday afternoon. Our first order of business today will be the consent agenda. These are items for which the petitioner is requesting withdrawal or continuance, or items for which staff has recommended approval and no one has signed up to speak in opposition. For all public hearings, each side will have a total of 12 minutes. There will be no rebuttal period. Once the public hearing is closed and the board goes into work session, no one is permitted to speak unless a planning board member asks them a question. For general use district zoning requests, the planning board must consider the full range of uses allowed in the zoning district being requested. The petitioner may not refer to a specific use for the property. For special use district zoning requests, however, the petitioner must identify the intended use or uses of the site and give specific details on how the site will be developed. Items under Section B of the agenda will require final action by the appropriate elected body, either the City Council or County Commissioners. As such, votes taken by the Planning Board concerning these items are recommendations that will be considered by the elected bodies during their review of the request. Before addressing the Planning Board today, we will need your name, address, and zip code for the record. Our first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the February 9th meeting. Are there any additions or corrections?
Move approval.
Approval by Mr. Lamb, seconded by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposes? That is unanimous. I'm now going to call on Mr. Brian Wilson to review the consent agenda.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I hope you enjoyed today's refreshments. And again, thank you for the call out on the 75th anniversary for the Winston-Salem South County Planning Board. The first item tonight is on the consent agenda is item B1. That's case number W3557. This petition has been withdrawn at the request of the applicant. The next two items on the agenda tonight are items B3 and item C1. Both of those items were requested to be continued to the April 13th, 2023 meeting. They met the automatic continuous requirement, so you'll be seeing those in April. Next item on the agenda is item B2. That's case 3564. The petitioner is Forsyth Economic Ventures Incorporated and the Housing Authority of the City of Winston-Salem. Petitioner is requesting a general use rezoning from RSQ to RM18. This is a 2.35 acre site located on the west side of North Cleveland Avenue between New Hope Lane and East 17th Street. As you can see on the location map, the site is surrounded by a mixture of RM18 and RSQ zoning districts. It is located in Growth Management Area 2. This is our 2022 aerial of the property. You can see the existing multifamily apartment structures on site. My understanding is the majority of those structures are currently vacant. Cleveland Avenue homes are to the south. You can see the commercial PB zoning there to the offsite to the west on North Liberty Street. This is the area plan land use recommendation map. The area plan does recommend a mixture of uses on the subject property and the surrounding area. These parcels are identified as part of the Cleveland Avenue Homes Transformation Plan, which recommends a mixed-use, pedestrian-friendly community with a mixture of housing types, including single-family residential, townhomes, and apartment buildings. This request would facilitate any future redevelopment of this site in an area well served by multimodal transit opportunities. Therefore, staff does recommend approval of this request. Answer any questions.
Any questions for staff? No one has signed up. Is anyone here opposed to this recommendation? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the most pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Mr. Lamb.
Second.
Second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Thank you, that is unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, I further move the planning board recommend approval of W3564. Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposes, that is unanimous.
All right, Mr. Chairman, the next item on the consent agenda will actually be pulled. That's going to go on a public hearing item request. So the next item we'll be forwarding to is item B6. That's case W3568. Petitioner is Salem Bottling LLC. They're requesting rezoning from PB and RSQ general use to PBL limited use request. This is a 1.78 acre site located on the north side of West Walnut Street between South Broad Street and South Poplar Street. As you can see on the location map, the site itself is currently dual zoned with the southern portion fronting along West Walnut Street being PB already, and the remainder of the site along South Poplar Street being RSQ. The site is surrounded on PB and PBL zoning to the east and south, and there's a mixture of RSQ and RS9, zoning to the north and west. This is the 2022 aerial showing the site as being largely undeveloped with vacant greenhouse and vacant residential structure placed on the northern portion of the site. And this is the area plan land use recommendation map. As you can see, it does recommend institutional land uses on the subject property. That was in recognition of the prior ownership by Old Salem and possible future expansion at the time. Since that time, this area has gone through significant change with many surrounding properties being rezoned to PB either before or since the area plan was adopted. In recognition of the existing residential homes to the west and north of the site, the petitioners work closely with staff to limit the intensity of the requested uses. They're also volunteering to install a 6-foot height opaque fence in addition to the required type 2 buffer yard adjacent to all those residentially zoned properties. The site itself is ideally suited to accommodate a multitude of pedestrian-oriented commercial residential land uses, and the request is compatible with the surrounding area. Staff does recommend approval of this rezoning request. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson, the history of this area, I know that Old Salem controlled quite a few of the buildings. I guess they had some plans that were more along the historic nature. It seems in recent years, just like you said, that many of these properties have asked for rezoning as pedestrian business or something like that. I feel like what's lacking is an overall plan and something that engages the neighborhood to ask the neighborhood, you know, what's your overall feeling about it? How do you like this and whatnot? I don't have any particular opposition to this, but I'm trying to get a sense of how far to the north does this push? Where are the boundaries with it? What kind of conversation has begun with the neighborhood since Old Salem gave up control of that property? I think people had a high trust of Old Salem, and now with going into private hands, it sort of changes the denominator, whatever.
Sure. Certainly taken under advisement, and we'll be more than happy to take a look at the area in further depth as this continues to redevelop.
Okay.
And just to add, Mr. Bryan, this site, again, if you look at the map that's in front of you right now, this is kind of the northern limits in terms of where that redevelopment area could exist, just because you get into the West Salem neighborhood fabric, which is much more single-family in character. And again, all our plans call for retaining that with a broad brush. And then if you look to the east, that's kind of where the townhomes on South Marshall kind of continue that are already in place there, some of those fairly recent in nature. So this is kind of that northern limit.
You think so?
just based on where this institutional blue is on the map, and again, kind of some of the other development constraints that are in place.
Okay. I've just noticed several houses going under renovation in that area, and I didn't know what their plans were as well.
And some of that is just, again, West Salem is a desirable neighborhood, given its location, and I know we have board members that live in that neighborhood, and some of that is just people recognizing that and investing in the neighborhood.
Any additional questions? All right, no one has signed up. Is anyone here opposed to this recommendation? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposes? Same, that's unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, I further move the planning board recommend approval of W 3568.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposes? That is unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, the next item, B8, that will now be a public hearing item. And we'll move on to item B9, that's case F1629. This petitioner is Sandra N. Roberts, requesting a rezoning from general use LB to HBL, that's Highway Business Limited Use. It's an approximately 1.39 acre site located on the south side of North Main Street. Again, this is in the far southeastern part of the county between Cedarwood Trail and Rich Fork Creek Drive. As you can see on the location map, the property is surrounded by commercial zoning on the east, the HBL zone property there, and a mixture of single-family and multi-family zoning to the northwest and south. The aerial shows the existing storage services business to the east, abutting the property. There is some undeveloped multifamily zone property. I believe that's owned by the church there to the south, and a mixture of undeveloped land and single-family homes on the RS20 zone property to the west, and then a manufactured housing development to the north. As you might notice on the area plan land use recommendation map, that actually was a mapping error. This is part of a special land use consideration area, so that that should actually be highlighted in red to denote the commercial land zoning that already exists there. This LUCA recommendation recognizes that existing commercial zoning along the North Main Street corridor and recommends that the existing commercial zoning continue, but does not recommend an expansion of commercial zoning outside of what is already commercially zoned. Therefore, staff's analysis, we found that this fit within the area plan recommendations and the general recommendations of Legacy to utilize underutilized commercial sites. Therefore, staff does recommend approval of this rezoning request.
Are there any questions for staff? All right, no one has signed up. Is anyone here opposed to this recommendation? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Mr. Lamb. Second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, I further move the planning board recommend approval of F1629.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous as well.
Mr. Chairman, the board will now go to case B4 on the agenda, case number W3566, and we'll hear from Mark Allred.
All right, we're here to talk about W3566. The petitioner is Agnes G. Fishel. The site is 18.88 acres on the east side of Peters Creek Parkway between Cena Avenue and Christina Road. The request is a special use rezoning from RS9 to RM8 special use. The site is located in GMA3 suburban neighborhoods across the street from the Peters Creek Activity Center. And the location map shows that to the north and the south of this property is RS9 zoning with single-family residential. To the northwest is institutional and public, which is a church. And across the street is major retail and business zoning, which is Walmart, which again is also part of the Peters Creek Activity Center. The aerial shows this to be a wooded area with a stream cutting through the middle. One of the things discussed that shows well in the aerial is there is currently a public street of Edgefield Drive. You can see that their public right-of-way comes down here. Currently, the pavement ends at the intersection with Cena Avenue. The proposal, when I go over to site plan, will to bring Edgefield Drive down to Kesteven Road, which is in that area. This is looking south on the Peters Creek Parkway. Subject property is on the left. This is looking at Peters Creek Activity Center across the street. This is looking south at the current terminus of Edgefield Drive. This is looking west on the Cena Avenue. The subject property will be on the left on the other side of the residential properties you see here. And this is looking north at where a proposed portion of Edgefield Drive will intersect with Kesteven Road. And this is looking west on the Kestevens Road. And again, the subject property is on the other side of the residential lots you see there on the right. All right, site plan. This is being proposed as a 135-unit townhome development with a density at 7.15 units per acre. There is 4 private streets and 4 new public streets and 1 existing public street that'll be extended. Again, that is Edgefield Drive that you see coming through. There is internal sidewalks on one side of the streets connecting the houses to the recreation facilities, which one, it will be in the middle of the property, and the other one will be in a northwest section between these 2 key turnarounds. And what's across the buffer yard here is the parking area for the church. The buffer yard that you see here will be a 15-foot type 2 buffer yard. It'll go around the northeast and the southern part of the property, and it will also is being proposed along the west edge along Peters Creek Parkway. Sorry about that. Also, the petitioner is working with WUSTA to look at a transit stop. So you see it here on the plan, but they're working on putting a transit stop too on this for this development. And the petitioner has also proposed putting in a 6-foot opaque fence on the eastern side of the property, and it also extends west, just north of the stormwater pond and south below these townhomes you see right here in the southeast section of the site plan. This is the elevations of what the townhomes will look like. The area plan has on here to be on the western side of the creek to be attached residential units, and on the east side is single-family residential units, 0 to 8 dwelling units per acre. Although the area plan use recommendation does not propose an extension of the attached housing across the creek, the overall density and layout of the proposed development is consistent with the larger goals of Legacy and the area plan. So in that case, the request is consistent with the larger goals of Legacy 2030 to provide needed additional housing opportunities along growth corridors, provides infill development with excellent transportation access into the serviceable area, and the estimated trip generation is comparable to what a single-family development would produce on site under the existing RS9 zoning district. For those reasons, staff does recommend approval, and the site plan does meet UDO requirements. Yes, sir.
Mr. Allred, I believe also in your description in the agenda, it mentioned that they were just going to put money in hold for the sidewalk on Peters Creek?
Yeah, thank you for that. So they're doing a fee in lieu for the sidewalks along Peters Creek Parkway.
Why?
That question, I'm not sure. That's a WISTA DOT question.
Well, is it really a DOT question? I mean, we've worked very hard on a Peters Creek plan to make it walkable. This is close to the intersection with Walmart, and there is general talk of trying to get people across there, and with adding more density on the other side, I don't want to see us setting up citizens to get hit trying to cross Peters Creek without a decent crossings and decent sidewalks, particularly if we're going to put a transit stop there. It seemed to make sense to go ahead and put a sidewalk. And I don't know whether the developer is willing to do that, I guess, since they're putting money on there. But if there's something where we're widening Peters Creek or something like that, I would understand it. But the Peters Creek plan said sidewalks.
Mr. George, Mr. Bryan, that's a good, that's certainly something that I believe that you could recommend. I don't know that, I'd have to go back and look at what the actual DOT comments were and what the rationale was. They were the ones that requested the fee in lieu versus the actual installation. I don't know whether it's because of the fact that, you have, at this point, there are no sidewalks on the east side of Peters Creek Parkway. On the west side, you do have some sidewalks, but they are, I want to say they come from the intersection with Stafford Village Boulevard and come down a certain way and then enter into the site at the transit stop, approximately where the MRBS is. Actually, yeah. There's a sidewalk along that section, and I believe there's a sidewalk along the northern section, but on the east side of Peters Creek, there are no sidewalks. I think it could be the thought that providing a section of sidewalk there would perhaps encourage folks to walk up Peters Creek Parkway, where then they have no sidewalk to continue walking, and then perhaps make a movement across Peters Creek at a non-signalized intersection. So I think it's something that we can investigate before it goes to City Council, unless the planning board wants to continue it and us bring the item back and be able to answer the question at that point. But I think we can do some further investigation behind the rationale for the request for the fee in lieu, but that's not that unusual in situations where there isn't a lot of sidewalk in an area.
To connect.
Yeah, it's just, I've been listening to the neighborhoods along there, and what they're saying is, we did this plan, 4 years ago? When are we going to see some results from this plan? This seems to be an opportunity to do this. And again, it is a formidable challenge to get people across Peters Creek. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is a dangerous thing. And I love the fact that we're doing more development and all of that, but we've got to realize that people want to use the services which are the other side of Peters Creek. So if you all would make a commitment as staff to investigate this, talk with DOT, and talk with the city council about it, that would satisfy me. But I do think that we need to start moving on this Peters Creek plan.
Is the closest crosswalk at Kess? Is it Kess?
There is no crosswalk.
Yeah.
There's a crosswalk crossing, almost forgetting the name of the street. We just did a rezoning over here. Stafford, thank you. Stafford Village Boulevard, but there's no crosswalk crossing over Peters Creek.
Mm-hmm.
It's
How close is the closest crosswalk?
The ballpark.
Really?
I don't know.
There is no crosswalk that I'm aware of across Peters Creek, except perhaps at the light at Wells Fargo. And no, there's not a crosswalk there. As far as I'm aware, there are no crosswalks along Peters Creek anywhere. And I believe the issue I believe the request, the reason for the request for the payment in lieu is whenever you look at the intersection at Stafford Village Boulevard and Peters Creek Parkway at Pinedale Church, there's a guardrail that's literally about 3 feet off the edge of pavement. So, even if a sidewalk were to go there, that whole intersection would have to be reconfigured to get the pedestrians from one side of a guardrail to the other side and then cross. Absolutely. So again, I think it's going to take a lot of planning outside of just incrementally putting sidewalk in.
But DOT made the recommendation. Okay.
Any additional questions for staff?
Yes, please.
All right.
I would just like to ask, as I have before but don't recall an answer coming, how long is the developer's money held into a payment in lieu of? If the overall plan doesn't ever take place, do they eventually get their money back?
That's a legal question.
I don't know the
It depends
answer
on what they
question.
draft as in their agreement.
Okay, well, if we could look into that as well.
Yes.
Any
I
additional
appreciate it.
comments or questions for staff? Thank you, Mr. Allred. With that, we will have a public hearing on this matter. As a reminder, each side will have a total of 12 minutes, and there will be no rebuttal period. We will start first with the proponents. We have Douglas Collins, Marty Bizzell, and Gary Walston. Again, as you approach the podium, if you give your name, address, and zip code for the record.
Did y'all have the PowerPoint?
They do.
Okay.
I mean, they can go first.
All right, it's up to you. Let me get your PowerPoint up real quick. There you go, and just click.
Good evening, Board. My name is Marty Bizzell with Bassix and Kennedy Engineers in Raleigh, North Carolina, 6310 Chapel Hill Road, and Raleigh 27607. First of all, congratulations on 75 years. I'm a 12-year member of the Clayton, North Carolina Planning Board, so I understand the service that you give to your city, so congratulations on that.
Thank you for your service as well.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Mark did an excellent job. He stole a lot of my thunder as far as the presentation that I have for you this evening. I just wanted to let you know that we are here representing KDM Development, and we have members from KDM Development here with us this evening. Obviously, Mark has showed where the property lies, and our slides look very similar there, and has gone over the rezoning request that we have, as well as the proposed land use plan. A couple of things that I just wanted to point out. Mark's presentation covered some of this, but we wanted to point out that out of the 18 acres or 18.88 acres, that 7.35 of that is an open space. And almost 2 acres of that will be in a tree save area. Some of that open space that is active, we have 2 areas, basically about 16,000 square feet combined. That would be a community garden with water access and raised beds for the residents of our property there. Our density does fall under the 8 acres or 8 units per acre, 8 dwelling units per acre at 7.15. One thing too that I want to highlight just a little bit more is that our stormwater control measures, we do have 3 of those proposed. Some of the things that came out of our outreach to the community, we had a neighborhood meeting, and it was very informative, very good. Councilman Taylor actually joined us with that, and 3 of these conditions that some of the newer ones we've actually added because of that. The fence that you see on the zoning condition was added due to comments from the adjacent property owners to the northeast of us. There was also the concerns, a little bit of some stormwater as we do drain through an existing neighborhood to the south. As a part of that, we went out and did some more survey work, and we have added to our requirements and zoning conditions that we will up the standards for our stormwater control measures to actually control up to the 50-year storm. So we've tried to listen to our neighbors, and we want to be good neighbors, and so we've added those conditions in as well. These were basically just blow-ups of that master plan that you see before you. We actually have added the drainage plan in there. I hope that made into your packets, where we've actually shown how the stormwater will be captured and conveyed to these stormwater control measures. And I won't go through all the zoning conditions, but they're pretty extensive, and we agree to all of those as they are presented before you this evening. We do also go forward, in addition to the elevations that have been shown to you tonight. We have architectural standards that we fully intend to adhere to as well, and those are entered as zoning conditions as well. And obviously those, I am here for any questions, but, and we can hold those later, but we're definitely here for questions and to try to answer anything that you may have.
Any question for Mr. Bizzle? Thank you. How much time do we have left?
7 minutes, 55 seconds.
Douglas Collins or Gary Walston?
I think we're a little out of order, but I'm Douglas Collins. I should be on your list.
Yes.
From 2836 Canatcher Road in Advance, North Carolina. I'd like to speak in favor of the proposal that they have brought before you. All the family, I'm the only one here, but everyone in the family is all in agreement with this plan. We've all looked over it. We've been to the meetings. We're all in favor of it, that own the land as it stands. Seems to be a good fit for the land. I know that I don't live there, but you know, they went above and beyond with their plans and what they have brought before you, and I think, looks like to me, they have it under control. We've been trying to sell this land for 15, 20 years is what we've been working on it for. Been shot down several times because of, you know, funding that didn't come through from potential buyers and things. You know, but it's just taken us that long to get to this point, and I would hate for something, you know, to come up now. That's why we're asking, you know, for this to go through. You know, years ago, we found out that we wouldn't be able to do commercial on that side of the street, of the property there. And our relatives that lived on the other side of the street, you know, theirs was listed as commercial. You know, I feel like we've already give up a lot, you know, by not being able to sell ours as commercial versus residential, because we all know that price difference is a lot, you know, versus selling something commercial versus a residential. And it's been for sale a long time. You know, if somebody wanted to buy it, you know, they didn't like what was gonna come up. I mean, you had to think in your mind, someday it's not gonna be 19 acres of wooded area that I'm gonna get to live with the rest of my life. Someday you had to knew something was gonna come of it. You know, it's just not gonna be there forever. We have estates that's being held open, two estates that are being held open because of that land sale that needs to go through, which we do. We pay the taxes on that land every year. We've paid them until the point where we don't really have much money left in the account to pay any more taxes. That's why we need to do something. We thought we had plenty of money, but over the years with lawyer fees and, you know, and taxes and things, it's just really took away our money, you know, that we would need to keep. If we had to keep the land, we would have to start putting money in out of our own pockets to keep everything going. So much so that we've done our own annual reports trying to save money, you know, because we just didn't have it to pay anymore. You know, I live out in the country, well, it used to be out in the country in Davie County. It's not anymore. I mean, I inherited a Ashley Furniture that does tractor trailers and millions of dollars worth of furniture. I got those. I didn't ask for it, but I got stuck with it. I got a tractor trailer junkyard that I had to live with, housing developments. My turkey hunting spot behind the house is now $750,000 houses. I didn't have the money to buy it. My only choice is if I don't like it, I guess I can leave. You know, I couldn't do anything about it. Nobody asked me, so I'm stuck with it. My grandfather, when he bought that land many, many moons ago, died in 1981. He probably didn't like all them houses being built around him either, but he wasn't given no choice. I mean, I'm sure, as you see, the houses are there and he's dead. So he got what he got, and there was no stopping the growth then. And the land can't, you know, once again, it just can't sit there. You know, we have to do something with it because we just can't afford to keep it. And trust me, I'd love to keep it, but I can't pay, you know, the price of keeping it, you know, to buy everyone else. We just don't have that kind of money, and we just really need to get rid of it. So that's why we're asking for your vote in favor of this proposal so that we can move forward and go on down the road and take our money and maybe do something else in life and not having to put our money into taxes and things like that every year. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
3.5 minutes.
All right, we have one other speaker. Yes? Okay.
Okay.
All right, is anyone else, we have about 3 minutes left here, would like to speak in favor? All right, we will now go to the opposition. I have Christine Dudgeon, I think, and Cynthia Smith. Again, would you state your name, address, and zip code for the record?
Christine Dudgeon, 691 Cena Avenue, Winston-Salem, 27127.
Thank you. And what would you like us to hear?
Just talking to some of the neighbors, we were just kind of opposed. We were thinking it was maybe going to be, actually it doesn't look too bad, but we like to have it, the wooded buffer. You know, there are homes over there that have pools and things behind them, and, you know, having a home right up against it, you know, just would be very nice. But it just seems like a lot of townhomes going back there instead of, if it was just a few, or maybe some single-family homes. Just seems like it's going to be a lot. It doesn't look like that space is that big. I'm sure they've worked it all out, but it just doesn't look that big. But just concerned about having too many people over that in that area. You know, it'd be okay to put some, but it just seems like it'd be a whole lot too much.
Any questions for Ms. Dudgeon?
And again, also crossing that street, you know, that's a
Yeah, that's a nightmare.
concern.
All right.
That's all.
All right, thank you.
11 minutes.
11 minutes left.
Good evening.
Good
My
evening.
name is Cynthia Smith. I live at 5070 Edgefield Drive, and I'm opposed to this. It's my understanding that at the Walmart Lowe's meeting, that development east of Walmart and Lowe's was supposed to be limited to single-family dwellings. This is in direct opposition to what was agreed upon in those minutes. I don't know when that exactly was, because I hadn't moved here yet. But that might be something you need to research before this is taken any further. With that many townhomes and that many people in that small little community right there, that's a lot. Going across Peters Creek Highway, I don't know if you guys live around there, but that's a dangerous intersection getting across to those commercial places. So that might be something to definitely take under advisement as well. That's all I have.
Ms. Smith, you mind giving us your zip code, please?
27127.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Let me just address something that you said, because I believe we heard in the presentation that that property was divided by the creek, and the property in the front was up for a different kind of development than the property in the back in the original plan that was over the creek. Was that correct, Mr. Murphy?
That's correct in the context of the area plan and the
Yes, the area
context.
plan, yep.
In the context of, I believe, what Ms. Smith is speaking of, that's related to whenever there was an activity center that was shown floating over kind of Peters Creek Parkway in that area in Legacy and some subsequent area plans in the mid-2000s, whenever Walmart and Lowe's came in to rezone the property on the west side. What happened was the activity center that had been floating kind of over the middle of Peters Creek Parkway, the decision was made to make the commercial core of the activity center on the west side of Peters Creek Parkway. And it was stated, I believe, as the gentleman who is one of the property owners, you know, the other side of the road got the commercial. Right. The agreement was there wouldn't be any commercial on the east side of Peters Creek Parkway, but it did not talk about intensification related to multifamily.
So what, whoops, so what's the, just ask our question for me. My understanding is it's being changed from one zoning to another, correct? What is it currently zoned as?
It's currently zoned RS9, and the proposal on the table is to change it to RM8.
What's RS9?
Single-family, 9,000 square foot lots.
Exactly. My point exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for your time.
How much time is left?
9 minutes.
We have 9 minutes left. If anyone else would like to speak in opposition, if you would state your name, address, and zip code for the record, please.
Daryl Smith. I'm at 5070 Edgefield with my wife, 27127. We had the man up here who was a proponent of this saying how he didn't like the fact that he didn't have a choice what was behind him or these big houses going around him. I have a house from me, 5 houses going on one spot. Then, to make it better, they decided to make Edgefield go all the way through that neighborhood, into my neighborhood, into the next neighborhood. I have lived there for 5 weeks. This is my retirement home, and you just feel like you're letting a lot of other people move right in. Any questions about that? The fact that right down the street from me, less than my dog walk in the morning, I'm going to have 132 townhouses. Thank you.
How much time is left?
8.5 minutes.
All right. Would anyone else like to speak in opposition? Again, if you would state your name, address, and zip code for the record.
Hello. My name is Tammy Caudle, Caudle. I live at 4821 Dorset Road, Winston-Salem, 27127. And the Edgefield, I don't know if their map can be put back up, but the Edgefield Road is going to connect to Dorset Road, which I live on the corner of.
Excuse me. Yeah, I want to come around.
Okay.
I apologize.
That's okay. And from what I saw on the map, there's going to be an entrance to that neighborhood, right? And then the next entrance is Castevens. Well, at Castevens is the turn lane into Castevens, and people try to do that U-turn to go back around, and I'm afraid that neighborhood is then going to be a cut-through. So I don't mind the neighborhood itself. The cut-through is where I have an issue. I don't know why it has to come all the way and connect to Castevens, because you're going to have the turnaround, and that's just, people don't know how to do the turnaround, believe me. I live there. They don't know how to do it. Because they don't know who has the right of way. And so you're going to have all those people not doing the turnaround and coming down through Castevens, coming through my neighborhood, and down through that road to cut through into their neighborhood. And that's where I have an issue. I have an issue with my neighborhood now becoming a cut through for that neighborhood. So that's where I stand, because I'm at that corner and I'm going to see all that traffic coming through. So that's my concern.
Thank you, Ms. Caudle.
Thank you.
7.5 minutes.
7.5 minutes left. Would anyone else like to speak in opposition?
My name is Nancy Nifong. I live at 5057 Edgefield Drive, Winston-Salem, NC 27127. I am concerned about the rezoning from single-family dwellings to multiple family townhouses. I have lived in this neighborhood for 47 years, and I have liked it. I have loved living in this area. But I do object to the new townhouses, homes being built, multiple dwellings. One reason, there will be more pollution, more congestion, also be more dust. We already have dust coming from Peters Creek Parkway and the parking lots from Lowe's and Walmart's that the dust settles on our deck and our sidewalks, where before that was built and incorporated, we did not have that. So I am opposing this strongly 100%, mainly because of the congestion and the pollution. And so I would suggest that you consider this back to single family units and instead of multiple housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nifong.
6 minutes.
We have 6 minutes left. Would anyone else like to speak in opposition? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. board, what is your pleasure? Any discussion, or anyone like to make a motion?
I like, the connectivity ratio is met with without both of those connections, I bet. Just one.
Well, I mean, it's a couple things. I mean, the connectivity ratio in the ordinance would require the connection, but just the general ordinance requires the connection to be made. Public streets have to be interconnected. There's a requirement to extend public streets. So, again, from a pure transportation planning standpoint, where they can be extended and you don't have intervening areas that prohibit such, as in development or intervening property that's a strip of property that will never be converted to anything. In this case, you don't have that situation. So again, that's an ordinance requirement from a connectivity index and from the fact that the ordinance requires interconnected streets.
Yeah, what's RS9 total unit count?
The total unit count of the existing acreage at single family, again, assuming developed at a PRD, is 91 units, and they're requesting 135. If you look at the trip generation manual, which is put out by transportation engineers, townhomes generally have a trip generation rate of around 6 trips per day, just based on generally speaking, those are generally occupied by folks that are, have less driving folks in their household, either before they have kids or perhaps after they have kids, or perhaps they're single folks or someone who's never going to have kids. So when you look at the trip generation for a townhome, it's around 6 trips per unit. For a single-family home, it's around 9.5. The trip generation for the 91 single-family homes is actually higher than the trip generation for the townhomes, even though you have a difference in 40-some units.
And if they develop by right without rezoning right now, they can get that number of units. There'd be no tree save. There'd be no open area.
More than likely, they'd have to do the tree save. They would have to do more than likely open space, because you probably couldn't realize the 91 units without doing a PRD, but they could do it by right and the road would still be connected.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Can we get some clarification from staff on this issue of east and west of the creek? I think maybe there's some confusion between the land use plan and zoning. I'm not sure. I feel like that was an issue early in the comments. And when you look at the land use plan, it certainly looks like there's a difference, but just can y'all clarify that a little bit?
So, Mr. Grubbs, I'll take a stab at that, having been significantly involved with the development of that plan and its predecessor plan. That was something that, again, staff saw that creek and kind of the draw that goes through the property is a natural dividing line where it might make sense to cluster attached units adjacent to Peters Creek and have single family adjacent to kind of the rear of the property. That being said, certainly, when plans come in, we work with petitioners and try and make them palatable to adjacent property owners, but at the same time, if something is generally compatible with the recommendations of the area plan and legacy, coupled with the fact that one of the city council's biggest concerns right now is provision of housing units, period, this seemed like a plan that staff could get board with as generally being supportive.
But if I understood the answer to Mr. Lamb's question, even if it was developed just like the land use plan spells out, you'd still have the connectivity on the eastern side, even if those were single-family houses.
Yeah. Again, as Chris said, that's actually something that's required by the ordinance where those connections are feasible, and in this case, engineering and DOT agreed that they are.
Okay.
So we're looking at 132 versus single family of 91.
In my notes, I have 135. The number could have gone down to 132. I'm not exactly
It's
sure.
135.
It's 135 versus 91.
Do we know what it would be if the front part was developed as multifamily and the rear was developed as single family?
I would say probably in the low 100s, but
that's what I guess. Okay.
So knock out about
pretty close.
30.
Yeah, probably split the difference given the fact that the creek kind of bisects the site.
If you were to do multifamily in the front, you'd probably be forced to do gardens, so it could potentially bump up higher than that.
And we're getting some stormwater control devices, and we're getting
A lot.
some urban infill.
And the fence, I think, that plus the pretty generous buffer.
trip generation
Is,
More than
is
RS9.
lower than,
RS9.
yeah, I mean, again, per the ITE, it's 870, it would be 871 trips for 91 single-family homes versus 785 trips for 135 townhomes, just based on the standard
Yeah, DOT.
assumptions made by traffic engineers.
6 versus what, 9.5, I think you said?
Correct. Generally.
All right. Any additional discussion?
Yep. I move that the planning board find that the request W3566 is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
I have a motion by Ms. McRae, a second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Oppose the same sign.
I further move that the planning board recommend approval of W3566.
I have a motion by Mr. McRae, a second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That is unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, Board, the next case we'll hear is case B5.
I thought that's why I was on the board. I know, right? You don't ever want that parking deck. You gotta tell me where you're going. That's why I have Mo with me. I was actually lucky that decision.
I'm small but feisty.
Right. That's small. That whole thing could have been just. Oh, yeah. With the churches open. I would thank you. Definitely.
I'm scrappy.
All right. Next up is case W3567. The petitioner is W.R. Hutchings Construction LLC. Site is 7.19 acres on the north side of Old Walkertown Road and Dippin Road. The request is special use rezoning from RS9 to RM8 special use. This site is located in GMA3 suburban neighborhoods. However, it is adjacent to GMA4. If I can get my mouse over here. There you go. Up here, adjacent to GMA4. And just to the northeast of the Northern Beltway. Location map has this property. The southern portion is in the city of Winston-Salem. The northern portion is in Forsyth County. This rezoning is contingent on the site being annexed by the city of Winston-Salem. What you see all the way around the property is RS9. The difference is, of course, is Forsyth County RS9, Winston-Salem RS9, and the town of Walkertown has an RS9 right there just to the west. The aerial, this used to be a nursing home, so you can see on the eastern side of the property, you'll see some, what's basically like a paved drive area that's still there. There, of course, is the Northern Beltway here, but there is no interchange. The closest interchange is that new Walkertown Road, which is about 2.2 miles away. This is looking at the site from the intersection of Old Walkertown Road and Dippin Road. And you can see it's a fairly flat area. If you look kind of past, you'll see a ridge because you can see the trees. You're only seeing midway. So you're a little elevated up above everybody. This is looking north on Dippin Road. Subject property is on the right. The Northern Beltway, as you can see, on the left. This is looking east on Old Walkertown Road. Subject property is on the left. This is looking west on Old Walkertown Road. Subject property is on the right. All right. So this site plan is 5 apartment buildings. 4 of them are 3 stories, which you see 1, 2, 3, and 4. The 5th building is 2 stories. This is a density of 7.19 units per acre. There is 1 private street. It also serves as the parking area that goes around. The internal sidewalks are on one side. It connects the apartments to the sidewalk and the recreation area that's here on the south side in between buildings 1 and 2 on the south portion of the property. There is a 20-foot type 20-foot type 2 buffer yard on the northern and eastern portions of the property. And in your conditions of the staff report is to continue this buffer yard along Old Walkertown Road. And on the Dippin Road is a 10-foot street yard. Here's the elevations for the 2-story bedrooms, and here's the elevations for the 3-story bedrooms. Again, as discussed before, this was originally institutional for a nursing home. You can see that portion of the property was taken by the Beltway. Across the street is also a church, which is also institutional. What you can also see is, look how large these properties are. They're fairly large rural properties that are spread around it. And then the Northern Beltway is to the southwest, but the closest intersection, again, is down here at New Walkertown Road. That's, again, 2.2 miles away. There is no growth corridor around here, and there is no activity center. The concern that staff has is that this is a very rural area, especially when you cross over the interstate, that a 3-story apartments would not fit in with the character of the community of the single-family rural community. And it would be out of character. The other issue would be if this was approved, we believe that you would see more encroachment of high-intensity residential coming into the area. So in summary, the request is inconsistent with both the Walkertown Area Plan Update and the Northeast Suburban Area Plan Update land use recommendations. The request is generally inconsistent with recommendations of Legacy, which promotes development which is compatible with its surroundings. And the approval of the request could promote land use intensification and rezonings in an area that is outside of a growth corridor activity center. And for these reasons, staff does recommend denial. The site plan does meet UDO requirements.
Mr. Bryan.
Mr. Allred, do we have somebody here from Walkertown to address their issues?
I don't. They didn't tell me they were coming.
Okay.
So.
Could you address? I'm trying to understand when we talk about compatibility. Yeah. We've got open fields there, so nothing's compatible with open fields, but.
Right.
Good old cotton fields or something like that. I don't know what. Maybe a nice wheat field. But there seems to be something about, incompatibility. I'm not seeing single-family homes, which I thought I would see. Can you see them from that site?
You can't. You cannot. Let me see if I can go back to the photo. So what you see from here, you can barely see it, but you see
right back in there. So those would be what what they're looking at.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to understand what they were saying, and I love having a local opinion on this, like them debating this and then bringing that forward. So I want to respect that, but that's where that's coming from. So they feel like 2-story would fit in with that residential back there.
Mr. Brown, if I could, I'm unsure. I mean, I don't know if we have anything in writing from the town of Walkertown in relation to this. It's the Walkertown area. It's the Walkertown Area Plan Update and the Northeast Suburban Area Plan Update, both which recommend institutional here, and that was a recognition of the nursing care institution that used to be there. Our concern is whenever you look at if you can go back to the growth management map, if you look at the area, there's nothing essentially but single-family homes within this entire area. There certainly aren't any multifamily. The closest multifamily to this area that I am aware of is the east side of Carver School Road, Lansing Drive. There are some apartments there. Our position is that, again, this isn't consistent with the plan, and until such time as we update the plan in the area, we think going to 3-story walk-ups is probably premature if we're going to take the leap into multifamily. I'm not saying we would support townhomes. There has been, again, just as we saw in the last case, as we've seen in some other cases where you have property adjacent to the Beltway, but not necessarily at an interchange, we have supported some conversion from single-family zoning recommendations to townhomes, it's our thought it's a little premature here, especially given the fact that we are so far removed from any other multifamily in the area.
Is the car lot in the picture is the car depot?
It's my understanding the car lot is further off to the east off of the area plan itself.
Okay. Yeah. But this, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, you don't.
How close are we to the 311 interchange? That's where this is, right?
It's about 2.5 miles.
2.5 miles.
That's the furthest interchange or the closest interchange to the north. So Newark Town's the closest to the south, 311's closest to the north.
Yeah.
Where's the closest activity center? You mentioned there's not one in that picture, is it?
It'd be
To the west at
Ogburn Station.
Ogburn Station.
well, either Ogburn Station or perhaps at
That's what the Motor Road.
Motor Road Extension and Old Walkertown.
Yep. Yeah. But it seems like if there's ever a place for high-density housing, it's adjacent to one of these
Yes.
interchanges.
Well, again, keep in mind, it's not an interchange. It's adjacent to the it's adjacent to the Beltway. And again, in our opinion, it's premature to kind of get the camel's nose under the tent at this point without having vetted it through a process. Right now, it's institutional. Again, we perhaps could get on board with towns, but obviously, it's within. If the planning board feels strongly enough that this is something that we need to do, and we think it would be good for the community with a housing shortage, et cetera, et cetera. Again, at the end of the day, staff is making its best professional recommendation based on the information that we have. Ultimately, we thought it was best to recommend denial. The planning board ultimately could recommend denial and it go to the city council and it still get approved. So, again, it's one of those things where, in our opinion, we're a little premature in changing something here, especially going almost like, 0 to 60. When we're looking at kind of institutional, everything surrounding it being residential, and then all of a sudden we're going to 3-story walk-ups. But again, that's just our recommendation.
Is your concern that this high-density multifamily is, I don't even know how to call it high-density, well, how many units is it per acre?
About 8 units per acre.
Okay, it's not high-density, it's low-density multifamily. You're concerned that it's going to preempt other commercial development that's going to be coming because of the interchange, or you just think it's just too abrupt right now, and you don't have any support from a new area plan?
It's the latter.
Okay.
It's the no support for the area plan. Again, if you look at the area plan recommendation map, you've got this blue area that they're looking to put the multifamily here, and then you have a lot of undeveloped properties surrounding this. And again, I'm not, if that's the will of the people, whenever we go to a new area plan and this whole area becomes very dense, then that's fine, because that's what the community has said they wanted. I don't think we have heard that to this point, because right now it's shown a single family.
But the area plan was done in 2014. Am I reading that right? Or is
2014 and 2016.
It's kind of on the line there.
18, sorry.
Yeah.
But it's certainly in 2014, nobody, I don't think, contemplated the Beltway being built. Certainly not at this point in time.
Again, given our past history with the Beltway, since it was shown on a map in 1960, and it's just now opened.
Right. Nobody thought it was ever going to be
You're
built.
right. I don't think there was a lot of faith that it would be there. Of course, it is now, but
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You first.
No.
The abundance of a lot of adjacent undeveloped land could potentially be a real carrot to some significant development, if and only if it is served by water and sewer. Are those areas served by water and sewer?
Not currently. Currently, water and
Or the
sewer end
plans.
on the other side of the Beltway. Certainly, and this is a bigger conversation than what we're having tonight, but others in the community are certainly looking for economic development opportunities. This general area could be a good candidate for that, given the large parcels and a minimum number of separate ownerships. And again, one of staff's concerns is if you build in your opposition, so to speak, with 3-story apartment homes, that may make that less viable. Again, that's not to say, as Chris said, that's the will of the people. We're just trying to we staff not.
Say that again, that last statement you were talking
Well,
about. I
basically,
missed it.
one of our concerns is if we're trying to preserve an area for economic development, and again, that's just one of its possible futures, if you put in an area of 3-story residential units, you're building in kind of some opposition to the industrial. The people who live in there probably aren't going to want industrial developments in their backyard, which again, that's.
But I mean, we're going to surround these interchanges with commercial, high-density multifamily, medium-density multifamily, and low-density multifamily, right? I mean, isn't that the theory?
Well, and again, that's at the interchanges we're talking about here. This is an area it's close to an interchange as the crow flies, but due to the circuitous transportation network, it takes a couple miles to actually get to an interchange. So again, staff is being a little conservative in this, trying to keep a variety of development options open on the table until we had some more robust public input. But as Chris mentioned, if it's the wish of the board to approve this and ultimately the city council, that's certainly perfectly fine. Again, we just didn't feel that staff had a strong enough basis. And similarly, this board recently approved some RM8 adjacent to the Beltway towards Kernersville off of Hastings Hill Road. That development we felt was a little more palatable, and that area also didn't have an area plan, by the way, because it was in kind of the no man's land between Kernersville and our jurisdiction. But we felt that was a little more compatible because it had that 1 to 2 story buildings rather than kind of the 3-story bulk as staff mentioned.
Prior to this case here, has there been any interest in this land at all? Any?
Not that I recall over the last several years. I don't remember anyone making any inquiries on this.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, again, we can sit here and discuss planning theory all day long and kind of give you our rationale. I would say, again, we're trying to look out for, what we think may be being premature and making sure that we don't set this area up for intensification until we hear from the people. With that being said, I believe the only reason we're having a public hearing on this is because we're recommending denial and there's no one here in opposition. So perhaps the will of the people is for this to be rezoned. So, again, I don't want to sit here and, continue to beat on a point. Again, we're happy to answer any questions. Again, I think this has been a good discussion, but unless someone is in the audience in opposition that hasn't signed up, I don't think anyone here is opposed to this.
I guess for me, one of the things it does do is, it kind of follows this principle that we try to adhere to of buffering less dense development with more dense development. And you do have a lot of single family to the southwest that this, sort of, if you have commercial development to the northeast, it does buffer it. I realize somebody may not feel like that's a buffer, but it is between single family and commercial.
And just remember from this map, straight line, it does look like it's just a hop over here because here's the interchange. But in actuality, you have to drive a mile into Walkertown, cut through, and come back down. So it's not the quick. But again, one of the realities was we felt that a 3-story structures would just stand out in the character and of what is around it.
Okay. What's the topography there, though? It's completely flat? Okay.
Again, because it was previously developed as a nursing home.
Well, yeah, I was talking about larger than the size, maybe.
Again, I think as you move to the north, it slopes down. You see kind of the way those streams flow there. But again, generally speaking, I think for the general vicinity, it's flat.
Ms. McRae, I think you were trying to say something.
Yeah, this is the tough bit, is that if we're going to push for density and a diversity of housing, this is low enough, but close enough to an interchange that we might as well spur whatever is coming to support that economic driver that will take over. There's plenty of space here, I think, to actualize that. And yes, potentially they'll be opposed, but in likelihood, those are the residents servicing those commercial components. And so I'm with you. planning theory would dictate that if I was in planning school still and taking the test, the answer would be, this is a flat out no, and it's a trick question. But I think we're,
Now that you've graduated from
now that I've graduated and I'm, yeah.
You know, again, just in all fairness, we did have a lot of discussion on this case, and again, you know, we kind of vacillated back and forth. At the end of the day, we decided to land on the on the cautious side, on the conservative side with our recommendation. But again, it wasn't like just out of the gate, no. So I mean, again, I can appreciate where the planning board is coming from with the discussion.
Well, I think as a planning board member, I appreciate you erring on that side. Let us, you know, you guys have told us what the plan is and that this doesn't follow the plan, and that was your job. I mean, so thank you.
Is there just one other question? What's the elevation of the highway compared to a 3-story residence there?
Good question.
Probably comparable. If you go back to that image, yeah, I mean, again, you can kind of see, you know, it's sitting well above. Yeah.
Good question.
Is there any concern about the annexation part of it, or is that pretty simple?
There's no concern on staff's part of the annexation. That would be a question for the petitioner and, you know, again, as they move through the process, I mean, it's a voluntary annexation. They can withdraw the voluntary annexation request up until the time it's actually acted on, but, you know, the action of annexing the property has to take place prior to the zoning hearing. So they're taking a risk of having the property annexed and then the rezoning denied. So that's the risk. There's no concern amongst staff as part of the annexation process, which we also run now. We reach out and get comments from fire and police and sanitation and those departments to ensure that it can be served and what the response time will be, et cetera. There were no concerns raised by any of the departments, so there's not a technical issue. It's just going to be what the property owner, the feel the property owner gets from, you know, for the possibility of getting it approved versus denied, and whether or not they have it annexed and then get denied.
Does the availability of water and sewer have anything to do with that request for annexation?
No, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Chris, from a procedural standpoint, I needed to go that it's inconsistent because that's the answer here, the test, and then approve the thing, correct?
Yeah, and again, yes. I mean, again, under the state statute, you can find that it's inconsistent with the plan, and then recommend approval. And then if the elected body does the same upon approval of the rezoning, the plan is considered amended.
Perfect. Okay. So I move that the planning board find that the request is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Ray, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion?
Whoa.
we haven't
Yeah, you
had
had done your public.
Oh, sorry.
Felt like we had.
They might. I don't know if there's anyone here in opposition. They might just want you to go ahead.
So there is no one in opposition. We do have proponents. Would anyone, Mr. Causey?
Real quick, Steve Causey, Allied Design, 4720 Kester Mill Road, Winston-Salem, 27103. I think Chris is correct. I really don't want to say anything right now, but I don't know if I should. We had a couple of points to make, but I'll be glad to step aside. So,
All right, so we do have a previous motion and second on the floor.
Mr. Chairman, if you could close, ask if there's anyone else, and then close the public hearing.
Did he open the public hearing?
I never opened it.
Okay, well, let's open it. Let's close it.
All right, so I'm going to open the public hearing. Is anyone here in opposition to this? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the pleasure of the board? Sorry, we have to do this over.
Okay, yeah, I move that the planning board find that the request is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Ms. McRae, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye. Aye. Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
I then move that the planning board recommend approval of W3567.
I have a motion by Ms. McRae, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That is unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman of the board. The next case is case B6, excuse me.
No.
B7, F1626, and we will again hear from Mark Allred.
I had the thought when we were having that discussion.
Blew it apart, yeah, all that. That was my fault.
All right. So we're here today to talk about F-1626, petitioner's New Hope Presbyterian Church. The site is 6.21 acres on the west side of Harper Road, south of Bullard Road. Request is a special use limited rezoning from RS40 to limited business, limited use. The limited use in this case is recreation services indoor, and to further restrict the number of uses, the applicant has put in a condition that limits the use to gymnastics instructions, which I'll talk about the conditions here in a minute that they proposed. This is a Legacy GMA 3 suburban neighborhoods, and it's just north of Clemens. And here's the site. Again, it's RS40. You've seen around the zoning for this is all RS40. The Village of Clemens is right here to the west, and their zoning is RS30. The aerial shows the existing building, the existing parking lot and the drive-through, and the recreation fields that were used by the church. And this is the subject property, as you see, the church as it's currently exists and used. This is looking northbound on Harper Road, subject property is on the left. This is looking southbound on Harper Road, subject property is on the right. And this is the property that's across the street. This is looking south from the parking lot. And this is looking at the western portion of the site. So this is the Clemens area plan. The Clemens area plan was not adopted by Forsyth County. However, the map does show the large lot residential communities that exist around the property. Staff is concerned that approval could establish more non-residential rezonings in the area, which would alter, which again is the rural character of this community. Here are the conditions that were volunteered by the petitioner. Again, the use of recreation services indoors shall be further limited to gymnastics instruction. No additional freestanding signs shall be constructed on site. No additional buildings shall be constructed on places site, and additions that are cumulatively greater than 15,000 square foot in size shall be prohibited. No additional outdoor lighting shall be installed on site. After looking at the conditions, staff found that the proposals will rezone a rural residentially zoned site to a more intense commercial zoning district. Approval could establish a precedent for non-residential rezonings in the general area, and the use included in the proposed request could negatively impact traffic generation and the character of the area. For these reasons, staff recommends denial.
Mr. Aubrey, what's the history of this property? How long has it been a church? Was that constructed as a church? Do we know? It was?
Yes.
Okay.
Approximately,
go ahead.
I would say approximately 2005,
Okay.
4, 5, 6, that time frame, and I believe probably either the church or the opposition could probably answer that question with a definitive date. Keep in mind that, just a little bit of context, churches are allowed in every zoning district in the world. And again, I mean, I say that, but I mean, it's true. And, and that gets back to, federal protection. And, part of the problem with that is, again, whenever you do build a church in a residential area and you build it at a scale, again, this isn't a large church, but, it's certainly larger than what you think of as traditionally being kind of a rural church. And, that whenever you have to adaptively reuse that building, if the church were to go away, it makes it difficult from a land use perspective to do that. Again, you either have to find another church or you have to find some other type of institutional, like a school that is allowed in residential zoning, or you have, you're faced with the dilemma of trying to thread a needle for some type of a rezoning, which is what we have here. Again, I say that to provide some context from a staff perspective. I mean, again, it's nothing against, private recreation. It's nothing against, the Clemens Gymnastics. I think they're a wonderful entity. It's just from a pure land use standpoint, this is not the appropriate location to establish commercial zoning.
I was just curious.
That was a long answer to your question, but
I mean, when you look at the picture, when you read it on paper, it's a church being rezoned. you think one thing, and then you see the picture, and it obviously looks like it could be a commercial building.
Well, and that was the reason for the attorney's
Sure.
decision on the spot zone.
Any other questions for staff? All right, thank you, Mr. Allred. We do have a public hearing on this. Again, each side will have 12 minutes to speak. In favor of this, we have Ladidra Mathalos and Nicole Leftwich. If you would please step forward and state your name, address, and zip code for the record.
Slideshow. There we go.
Good evening. I'm Ladidra Matthews. I'm an attorney with Fox Rothschild. It's my handwriting, blame it on me. I'm an attorney with Fox Rothschild in their Charlotte office. That's 101 North Tryon Street, Charlotte 28205. As Mr. Allred said, I am joined by Nicole Leftwich. You can come on up. Who is the co-owner and COO of Clemens Gymnastics, who will provide a few comments at the outset of the presentation and then be available for any questions that you might have afterwards.
Good evening. My name is Nicole Leftwich. My address 687 Old Cypress Road or Old Cypress Drive, Winston-Salem 27127. I just want to speak briefly. We currently have just outgrown the space that we're in. So it's not that we're trying to build this huge empire. We're just trying to give space to what we currently have. Our hours of operation, generally speaking with recreation, the kids are in school during the day. So we do operate until about 7:30, between 7:30, 8:30 at night. The majority of our clientele is from the Clemens area. So we are a business that has been around for over 3 decades and do support the neighborhoods that are currently around us and the children that are there.
Thank you, Nicole. I have a few slides on site overview, but you guys ran a very efficient meeting, and Mr. Allred covered a lot of it. This is the aerial that you have already seen. I'm going to go quickly through these slides, but I will just say that the church is about an 18,000 square foot, 2-story building. The first floor is gymnastics, I'm manifesting here. The first floor is a gymnasium. They don't have a traditional sanctuary. It's a gymnasium where they hold their services. And the second floor is a series of multi-purpose rooms that were used for a daycare that also operated in this facility up until, I think, the beginning of this year. And that's the picture of the church. And the daycare, I do have in my notes to say that the daycare had about 80 students on average per day. Nearby uses, this is Jerry Long Family YMCA. It's located approximately 0.75 miles to the southeast of the subject property, and that's just based on using the county GIS measuring tool, as you see at the bottom. This is one of the largest, if not the largest, YMCAs in the region, with over 13,000 members from nearly 7,000 households. Another nearby use, Peace Haven Village, also located less than a mile, according to the GIS measuring tool, to the southeast. It's a public anchored shopping center where you'll find a mix of restaurants, medical offices and facilities, retail stores, and financial institutions very close to the site. Now, moving on to an overview of the request. This is a screenshot of the approved site plan for New Hope. One of the reasons that this request was submitted without a site plan is because Clemens Gymnastics intends to use the existing site and the site layout with no changes except those that may be required by the UDO for the proposed zoning district. Clemens Gymnastics also proposes or intends to do some light upfitting on the inside of the building to include knocking down one of those walls upstairs on that in the multipurpose rooms to create a larger room, and adding some windows from the second floor so that parents could see their children during gymnastics instruction. As Mr. Allred already said, the rezoning request includes only one proposed use, which is indoor gymnastics instruction, and that's a subcategory of indoor recreational facility use. On the right of your screen are examples of some of the uses allowed under the current RS40 zoning district. And you'll notice that many of these uses would carry the same or higher intensity than the proposed use. And I think it's especially worthwhile to notice that a public recreational facility is an allowed use by right under the current zoning. And I think that this is important because this rezoning is essentially necessitated by the fact that Clemens Gymnastics is a for-profit as opposed to not-for-profit business. Some of the other permitted uses, as you see on your screen, I won't go through all of them: private swimming pool, police or fire station, public or private school, as Mr. Murphy mentioned earlier. And of course, churches and religious institutions are permitted use in this district. New Hope has several tenants that it previously rented out space to in the building for a number of different activities and events. Many of those are listed here. They include several, again, recreational activities such as sports practices, games, free play, competitions, community theater, daycare, health clinics, and graduations. So, I mean, just to wrap up those last two slides, I bring those up, and I think it's important to mention that the proposed gymnastics instruction is very similar, not only to the ways that the church has been used in the past, but to uses that could be done by right if the rezoning is not approved. Moving on to community input, Clemens Gymnastics has gone beyond the UDO requirements related to community outreach by mailing a 3-page question and answer letter to neighbors explaining the request. A neighborhood meeting was also conducted, the summary of which is included in the agenda packet. Additionally, the applicant was made aware of an online petition created by a group named the Harper Road Neighbors. That is also included in your agenda. Although there are questions about how many of those signatures on the petition are actually from individuals who live nearby or would be impacted by the rezoning, Clemens Gymnastics did not take the feedback lightly, and we'll talk about how we'll talk about some of the proposed conditions that came about because of that feedback. But on the right of your screen, we were able to kind of categorize and organize those concerns around these 5 areas, which include a lack of additional conditions or uncertainty of the use, potential nuisances, signage, buffers, and traffic. And then also in your agenda packet, you'll see that this, and what we learned throughout the process is that there is a lot of support for this relocation despite the very vocal opposition. And that's not just from current Clemens Gymnastics students. Actually, some people have signed up because they've seen the zoning cases. They stopped by to see what the deal was and decided that this was something ultimately good for the community and that they wanted their students to be a part of if it did relocate to Harper Road. Again, the application was filed with just one proposed condition, and that was limiting the uses to this following 8 on your screen, and that has further been limited to the only use that Clemens Gymnastics intends to use it for, and that's shown here. Additionally, proposed conditions. Again, Mr. Allred stole my thunder too, so I won't read them again to you, but we're happy to answer any questions about those. We also had a traffic study conducted by Davenport Engineering to analyze the impact that the proposed use would have on Harper Road traffic, given the concerns. And I do believe that you all received a copy of that, but if you don't, I have additional copies here today. The study concluded that there would be no adverse effect on traffic. Harper Road's capacity is over 15,000 vehicular trips today. With the anticipated traffic from Clemens Gymnastics, the road would still be at about a third of its capacity. Let's see. The traffic study was conducted on Wednesday, one of Clemens Gymnastics' busiest days. So we wanted to put forth the most conservative numbers to you, but I do want to point out that at their current Hackers Bend location, they share the driveway that was used for this traffic study with 4 other businesses. So the 320 daily volume vehicle trips you see here accounts for vehicular trips from those other businesses as well. And again, was taken on their busiest day, which is Wednesday. You heard a little bit about the Clemens Community Compass update. It designates the subject property as cluster residential. However, even the village has conceded that the plan doesn't provide much information about appropriate support services or secondary uses here. So I would say that the proposed use is not necessarily inconsistent with that future land use map or the compass, the Clemens Compass. I would actually say that the proposed use is consistent with, number one, the current use of the property, and number two, the types of uses that would, again, otherwise be allowed in this residential district. And again, I talked about a few examples that I highlighted for you earlier, but this is the full list of uses allowed in RS40, and that's included in your agenda packet.
You have 2 minutes.
Okay. Notwithstanding the issue of ownership, the rezoning request is in conformity with the intent and spirit of the county's comprehensive plan. For your convenience, I've highlighted a few of those provisions of the plan that would support this rezoning. Reuse of land and buildings, moving away from separate and buffering some of the land uses to blending and transition of land uses, promoting healthy lifestyles and increasing collaboration with businesses just like Clemens Gymnastics to provide access to recreational facilities. And something that I did not mention earlier, but again, I think that this boils down to an issue of ownership and not necessarily land use. This use would be allowed if they were a public entity, and North Carolina courts have disapproved the distinction of land use based on ownership. So we'll close by skipping the rest of my notes and asking that you approve or request approval of this rezoning request, and we're happy to answer any questions.
The 320 car count, that's not total trips. That's just how many cars would be coming and going. I'm trying to get.
Is that peak?
That was peak.
Is that trip generation? Okay, that's peak.
That's
Never
peak.
mind,
So
never mind.
whatever the
Got it.
busiest hour is, that's the peak.
Okay.
That was I'll have to look back to be certain that was the daily volume, and then the AM peak and PM peak are here for you. So AM peak, essentially no traffic. PM peak, 39 entering and 38 exiting, again, from this parking lot and driveway that is shared with 4 other businesses.
And your last point that the legislature has said there shouldn't, if a church can do it, anybody can do it. Isn't that what your point is?
No, that is
Okay.
not what I'm saying at all. And I want to go on the record saying that. I think, well, my point about ownership, is that what you are?
Yeah.
So again, the church is not the only entity that could operate recreational services here. That could be any public or nonprofit organization. So I certainly don't want to say that Clemens Gymnastics should be availed to the same privileges of a church. That is not what I'm saying at all, and I'm glad that you asked and allowed me to clarify that.
So the church is still being operated as a church. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you asking now or?
Now?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
But that's not expected to continue if the ownership of the property transfers, correct?
Yes, the contract is actually contingent upon the rezoning, and they, I don't know if anybody from the church is here, but they would like to get this resolved either one way or another so that they can not be operating in this area. They are moving.
Did staff have any concern about limiting the use so narrowly in terms of, I'm just thinking about, I have no doubt, given the gymnastics folks' long history, that they'll be successful if they wind up here, but what about if they don't? And now we've got a property that can only be used for a gymnastics studio that's perhaps out of character with the rest of the neighborhood.
You know, again, asking that in the context, is that a concern of staff? Yeah, I mean, of course it is. You know, again, we're recommending denial to, you know, even with the larger list of uses. Obviously, the more that you narrow a list of uses, including going so far as to, you know, within the subcategory of private recreation and saying it can only be gymnastics, Yes, I mean, that can potentially be a major issue should, Clemens Gymnastics be successful for the next 30 years, but decide they want to retire, and the next person doesn't want to run a gymnastics place, and they have to worry about this 30 years from now were it approved. With that being said, I mean, again, this is a limited request, and, I believe that it was an attempt by the petitioners to try to thread the needle to allay concerns. And, again, yes, I mean, yes, it's a concern.
And if I may just respond, if that's okay. We are completely on board if it is the board or the commissioners wish that some of these be added, and that is why we initially narrowed it down to these 8 to include uses that were already in the church and seemingly compatible with the neighborhood based on the historical use, but we did narrow those down because of the concerns that we heard from the community. So again, we're happy to add those back or change the condition.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Attorney Matthews or Ms. Leftwich?
Yes, please. Thanks for all the great work you do, first and foremost. How many square feet are you in now, and how many students does that serve?
Currently, we are operating in 6,875 square feet, and we have approximately 462 students a week.
So to move to this location, you would be tripling in size.
Yeah, essentially, as far as the size, but right now we're operating so close and on top of each other that we're wanting to do this for the safety of our clients so that we can spread everything out and our intent is not to grow into this big, enormous and triple the size of our clients, but more or less give all of our programs the space that they need to operate safely.
Is this building serviced inside with an elevator for the safety of the kids going up and down the stairs?
There is no elevator.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I do want to go back and point out, I just want to make it clear for those in the audience, those perhaps that are watching at home, which I don't know how bored you have to be to do that, but sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah. And the planning board, the item was advertised as just the use rec services indoor. It was not further limited to gymnastics, but those uses there were culled down from the original proposal. So I believe the last advertisement just included the use rec services indoor. So to have those uses, would it be the desire of the planning board and or the commissioners, there would have to be a pause hit, and those would have to be added back to the advertisement. I just say that because I don't want us to go down a path where we say, well, it's so narrowly crafted, we want to add these uses back in. We couldn't do that on the floor here.
Tonight.
Correct.
Are there any other questions for the proponents? All right. Thank you both. All right, we will now turn it over to the opposition. We have, I think this is Roy Davis, David Niblock, Allison, and Jim Manning. If once again approach the podium, state your name, address, and zip code for the record, and the total time is 12 minutes.
Ron Davis, 2590 Harper Road. I live immediately adjacent to the property, and I'm here representing myself or speaking for myself and approximately 500 residents of the Harper Road community that are in opposition to this rezoning. We did remove over 120 signatures from the list. The list you got was culled down from what you're seeing online. This map represents a small portion. I mean, we've run out of time and the door knocking, but this opposition, these people had signs and they were in opposition to this rezoning. Economic impact. This remote spot zoning would have a tremendous negative impact on the surrounding property values, estimated to be in excess of $500,000. It is well known that a high-intensity use with long and late operating hours would negatively affect our property values and quality of life. The Hunter property next door is for sale as residential land, and in this case, it put it on hold pending the outcome. Riley Lynch, their agent, is here, and he can attest to that. People raise their hands that are here in opposition, if you would. This is a picture of an accident occurred while we were out there putting up signs. Lady flipped the car. It's located in properties in one of the most dangerous road sections in North Carolina, in what the community, NCDOT, and the Highway Patrol call Dead Man's Curve. I've personally seen over 100 wrecks in these curves. John Davenport's report shows that the entrance, which cannot be moved, does not meet the site distance requirements required for renewal of the DOT permit. It cancels with rezoning. The traffic count in the staff report and Davenport's report does not account for the additional 15,000 square foot addition that she is asking to be included for future, which would result in a 7 times traffic increase over a church. Spot zoning. The area is designated as large lot residential, and contrary to the petitioner's large statement about variety of zoning types around it, the staff report correctly states that they are all residential. That commercial is up the hill and in Clemens. David Owens of the North Carolina School of Government states that in Blades versus City of Raleigh, quote, the courts emphasize the need to reasonable basis to justify spot zoning largely in terms of effect on neighboring properties. General Statute 160D through 701 requires that the zoning be made in accordance with a comprehensive plan. A rezoning decision on a relatively small parcel that does not consider the effects of the rezoning with the larger community context violates this mandate, usually triggered by efforts to secure special benefits for particular property owners without regard to the rights of the adjacent landowners, and for the benefit of one and the detriment of many. The property was only marketed to commercial interest. I personally contacted the 3 largest churches in Clemens, and none of them were aware this property was for sale. There was no signage out there. I personally showed the property with the associate pastor, their permission, and was able to get an executed contract in place with an area church. They are here as well. If they had contacted the local churches, we would not be here. A church would be operating on site with the community support. This rezoning is denied. There will be a church on the property with the community support and no rezoning required. If you would, please vote no for this.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Are there any questions?
Well, you mentioned, I must have misheard it, the drive permit would be canceled upon rezoning?
With rezoning, the church was granted a driveway permit, very special favor because of their time of operation. You don't have but 400, I would debate the distance because the leaves are off. When you leave this property and you look left, you have approximately 400 feet of site distance. It's required to have 650 for the driveway permit because churches operate at different time frames, at non-load times, not all day long, all night. They granted special favor privileges like churches, just like our residents work to get them on this site, and we've helped them for years to stay on the site. But that thing will terminate with rezoning. They have to reapply. That's why this John Davenport report, and John Davenport's report says that it doesn't meet the standards and may be putting in turning lanes, decel lanes, which you cannot do because of the curves and the bridge. There's not the distance for the tapers. You can't do it. I mean, unless somebody's going to grant a waiver or something, but they would be putting a lot of people at severe risk. This is really, if you've been there, you would understand it is a really unusual place. A church operates in the morning, schools manage traffic, they can get in and out of there safely. And, that's what we would like to see here, and there's an opportunity for that to be here if they had just marketed this property to the general and not commercial higher value marketing. I mean, I did a research on it for a commercial entity, and we were told we could not get a driveway permit. And it was an inappropriate use as well, daycare. We couldn't get a daycare. They said no. The DOT said no.
Thank you.
8.5 minutes.
All right.
I mean,
I was just going to say,
that doesn't factor into this time question.
No.
Okay.
Driveway permits are required for changes of use. And this would constitute a change of use. Now, I can't speak to what NCDOT would do when they reviewed the driveway permit, but that's what is, I mean, essentially anytime there's a change of use for a piece of property, it necessitates a new driveway permit.
In your interdepartmental review, who from transportation takes a look at something like this?
Well, again, this being a limited use request, it didn't go through that. But at such time, again, playing out the string, were it to be rezoned, there would be a requirement for a driveway permit to be submitted to NCDOT, and basically we would have to have their review back before we would issue the permit for the establishment of the use.
John's report says it doesn't. It says it doesn't. I mean, this thing says it doesn't. I've tried twice. I can't get one. 3 houses maximum. Church.
Any additional questions for Mr. Davis? All right. How much time is left?
8.5 minutes.
Still 8.5, all right. David Niblock?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm David Niblock. And while Mr. Davis is very eloquently has the ear of and is the voice for a number of folks in the area, he also asked us to be his attorney, our firm, to assist him concerning this matter. So it's an honor to be here before you. And I don't want to really try to repeat much of what he said, and I want to reserve enough time for Ms. Tomberlin, who has important things to say. But we would respectfully request that the board can deny the request for the rezoning. In our opinion, the subject site does not meet the definition of the purpose of the LB district zoning. It's not located near the intersection of a collector street or a thoroughfare in areas which are otherwise developed with residents. This is not, I think this is important, a transitional area. Proposed use is not a business that would serve the nearby neighborhood. Further, we believe the proposed commercial use is incompatible with the surrounding single-family homes. The traffic study, which was just reported upon, I will not go into other than to affirm what Mr. Davis said and what the board has heard this afternoon concerning that. The curve there is remarkable. I, of course, went out to view the property to look at it, and he does not really exaggerate enough the danger of that particular location or this circumstance, and the substantial increase of the traffic in that area is an absolute clear and present danger. That may not be the correct legal term to use in this circumstance, please forgive me, but it would certainly exacerbate the situation. The relevant Legacy 2030 recommendations encourage redevelopment and reuse of existing sites and buildings that is compatible with and complementary to the surrounding area. With all due respect, while I realize and understand it may be a matter of degree, but the proposed use of the gymnastics is not the same as the church that's been there. It is entirely different in many respects, and I think that's very important. The spot zoning, with all due respect to the opinion of Mr. Johnson, I disagree with it, but I understand and acknowledge that the way those sorts of things go, it's a factual case, but I believe that it could very well be determined to be spot zoning. Looking at cases, including the Covington case, the town of Apex, the Busey case, and the town of Charlotte, I believe there is precedent out there that could determine this is, in fact, once again, because of the degree, a clear example of spot zoning. So we would ask the board to consider that. Also, as the cases reflect, the widespread opposition to this proposal can and should be considered by the board, and I would simply say that, as I said earlier, it's incompatible with the neighborhood, which is not only residential, and I think someone mentioned this earlier, but when I was there and viewed it, it's not just residential, it's rural residential. And I think that one of the main points is the idea that this creates a precedent for additional commercial use in that area, which is not consistent with the plan or anything else that will be considered by this board or the governing authority of any kind at this point. I think that's a very key point. Also, in the staff's report, which was very well drafted, with a great deal of due diligence gone into it, obviously, if you note the positives and the negatives, there's one positive and several negatives, and I would ask the board to simply note that. And also, I think that as we're talking about the possibility of another church, I think one of the things that is required is the possible use that could be allowed there without the necessity of rezoning. And that's what I think we were saying about other churches that could avail themselves of that, and in fact are ready to do so, as I understand it. So with all due respect, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I'll certainly will answer any questions that I can, but we would respectfully ask that you deny this petition.
Any questions for Mr. Niblock? Thank you.
5 minutes, 20 seconds.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name's Allison Tomberlin. I live at 2675 Forsyth Club Drive, Winston-Salem, 27106. I'm an attorney for Agape Faith Church. If you are a pastor for Agape Faith Church, please raise your hand. They are here in strong force. Agape has been serving the Clemens community for 41 years on a mission to love its neighbors and better its community. And it's here tonight because it has a very strong interest in the outcome of this rezoning petition, because the current owner, New Hope, has accepted Agape Faith's backup offer to purchase this property. Mr. Murphy said earlier that it would take another church moving in to resolve this problem, and in fact, another church is ready to move in, so that you do not have to worry about any rezoning. They can operate as the land has been used, as the facility has been used. They can continue that operation as intended within the current RS40 zoning. I believe this is the best possible result for the Harper Road neighbors and hopefully for this planning board. As you're aware, any North Carolina zoning law requires that any decision should, to the extent possible, follow a comprehensive plan that's already in place. We've heard a lot about the plans that are here. I want to just briefly touch on them again because significant time and effort has been taken already to study and plan this particular area of Clemens. In 2018, although not a zoning issue, there was the Peace Haven-Stiers Ferry Road Connector Study, which I'm sure you all remember trudging your way through. It was completed. And there was also an extensive study in 2019 by the Village of Clemens when it completed its comprehensive plan. Both of these projects involved public input, and they also involved careful attention to improving transportation and connectivity in this Clemens area, particularly on this bit of Harper Road. The two studies detail the unique character of this area that is west of Louisville-Clemens Road. Some of the commercial developments that were pointed out by the proponents are talking about developments to the east. That's not this area. Both of these studies paid particular attention to this area west of Louisville-Clemens Road and its unique character. They described a long-term intent to slow the pace of commercial and high-intensity development. The Clemens Plan plainly states, quote, future land uses within this corridor should respect existing developed areas that are likely to remain stable over time, such as churches and other institutional uses. In fact, that is the biggest difference here that we've heard between the current use of the property and the use under this zoning would be that Clemens Gymnastics, for all of the great things it does for the community, it's a for-profit business that wants to potentially triple its size. That is not a stable use and predictable use of the property like you have in the case of the church that's already there. You're necessarily, there's in no reality does the traffic not increase over time on Harper Road. If you're putting a for-profit business in there, a business that depends on growth to improve. Similarly, these studies, the connector study in particular, highlighted 15 properties within the study area with potential historic significance. And that historic significance is worth preserving. 2 of these properties are a stone's throw away from the subject property on Harper Road. So these historic areas should be protected from commercial encroachment as well. And then finally, you might remember, and has already been mentioned here, the connector study revealed that this section of Harper Road has a higher crash rate already than the North Carolina average crash rate. So this traffic concern is a serious one. Clemens Gymnastics is a thriving enterprise. You were provided information about what they do during the school year. You were not given information about what they do during summer and when they're off from school, which is that they hold camps throughout the day, starting early in the morning until later in the evening. It's a terrific service, but is a very busy commercial enterprise, and this is simply not the place for that commercial enterprise. This increased use would be directly at odds with all existing plans, and we ask that you not undo the careful planning that has already been done to maintain and preserve the cultural, historic, and agricultural character of this part of Clemens west of Louisville-Clemens Road. There's a path forward where we can continue to use the property as a church. We hope that you will deny the petition so that we can move forward on that path. And that's all that I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Tomberlin.
45 seconds.
Mr. Manning, if you would state your name and address for the zip code and utilize your 45 seconds. Sir.
I'll do my best, sir. I am an attorney, but I'm not representing anyone except my wife who sent me down here tonight. James Manning, 7008 May Lake Road, 27012. My wife and I, we did not sign the petition. We did not get a knock on the door. We are just concerned citizens. We live probably less than half a mile as the crow flies. Once you come from Publix in the commercial center up by 40, and you come through the roundabout at Harper to go down the circle, you're in the country. And that's what we love about where we live with our kid. Noise pollution, light pollution, air pollution, in addition to the traffic concerns you've heard about. The one specific story I'll leave you with, we have a game camera. We get deer in the yard all the time. We see coyotes, you hear them at night. You're out in the country. A commercial doesn't make sense. To Mr. Grubb's point, why limit it to something this narrow? Because that's the only thing that works there. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for anyone from the opposition? If not, I declare the public hearing closed. Any discussion from the board, or would anybody like to make a motion?
Let me just discuss. And I mean, to me, there's some simple things about this because historical, we've dealt with churches by right having this ability to do this. When they leave, that doesn't mean you get to just change zoning. It's a tough situation. I've been the executive where I've had churches on my property 2 times, and we know that that's the downside of it. So it's a very simple decision for me when I look at a situation like this.
The only thing I'll say, and is kind of driving my decision on this, is it's similar to the tea house case that we had several months ago. And though the intent is admirable, it doesn't fit with the current character. And so I'm ready to make a motion, but let the rest of the board speak if they would like to.
I did have one before, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Attorney Niblock said the proposal doesn't meet, I'm paraphrasing, but the petition doesn't meet the requirements. The proposal doesn't meet the requirements of LBL. In proximity was what he, I think, was emphasizing, proximity to a certain number of residents, or
Well, and again,
part of that.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those things where keep in
So my
mind.
question is, does staff agree with that argument?
Keep in mind, whenever you're looking at zoning districts and you have purpose statements, they're somewhat aspirational.
Right.
And, you know, yeah, right. So, I mean, again, with a purpose statement for a limited business, it basically says it should be, you know, close to neighborhoods, neighborhood serving. But again, it should be, but it does say it should be on, like at the corner of a collector or a thoroughfare. This isn't that. So again, you have the aspirational goals of what a zoning district says. You also have the competing interest of what is the least intense district that allows the use that you want to do. So you kind of have to balance those things. From a pure planning standpoint, we probably said, we're not going to support this, but if you're going to bring forward a proposal, the best district to bring forward is the least intense district that allows the use that you want to do, which is limited business. So, what Mr. Niblock said is certainly something that should be considered, but keep in mind that, we as a staff have to offer our professional services to clients, even if we know that we're not going to recommend approval of what they're asking for. So we're the ones that said, if you're going to ask for this, ask for LB because it's the least intense district that allows the use you're asking for.
Okay. And then the point was made by the proponent that the church has been leasing the property to other folks that conduct different types of activities. Is that correct?
Well, again, I believe that was the testimony that was given. I believe I have heard and seen things that allude to that fact. I will say that it's my understanding a daycare was operating in there, but I can also let you know that there's never been a daycare permit that was ever issued. That was ever issued to the church.
Okay.
Basically churches, I believe, and again, I'm looking at the land use professional staff. I believe that the provisions for churches that are operating daycares say that unless the zoning district you're located in allows the use daycare, you would have to get a special use permit from the Board of Adjustment to do that. And I didn't do a search, but I don't ever recall seeing that there being a special use permit for that piece of property for a daycare. So again, even though it may have been being done, perhaps the neighbors were gracious and didn't make a complaint, but that was never legally permitted that I'm aware of.
And then lastly from me, if the if the gymnastics company leased the property versus purchasing the property, It shouldn't.
No, again, land use gets to the use of the property, not the ownership.
Exactly.
And again, I would like to just take one moment to talk about the difference between recreation services indoor, which is, again, there's a definition for that, and recreation facility public. And recreational facility public is defined as an area or facility designed to meet the demand for active recreation, including play fields, ball diamonds, parks, picnic and playground equipment, park courses, tennis courts, swimming pools, tot lots, and similar uses available to the public and under the management or control of a public agency. Again, there is a distinction between a public park and a public recreation facility and a private rec services indoor, which says establishments engaged in providing indoor amusement or entertainment services. And again, so, there is a distinction. We did run that by the county attorney, who said, yes, that does not run afoul of land use law. Again, that's his opinion. Doesn't mean an attorney couldn't have another opinion contrary to that, but we did actually have that discussion with our county attorney.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Murphy, you're clear on mind. So if a church wanted to operate a gymnasium upstairs, that would be perfectly fine.
I mean, again, as long as it is in support of their, of their mission, yes. And again, I'm not sure, yes, a church typically, especially in today's environment, generally, I didn't realize that the way this church was set up, it was kind of a multi-purpose spaces where they held their services. But most churches today, if they're being built, have gymnasiums and other things that go along with it to kind of, to cater to the whole family. So, again, it would have to be in support of the church.
Which goes to the one point I think I sort of disagree with Ms. Tomberlin on. Given the amount of church staff that's here, I don't think you can draw the conclusion that churches don't want to grow or expand their business. I certainly have not ever seen a church that didn't want to grow that lasted too long.
Right.
So.
And the point is that the church could, as long as it's aligned with fulfilling their mission, they could certainly have as intensive or even more intensive activities here. It's just the church can do it.
You're exactly right. And again, it's kind of that balance, it's kind of threading that needle. It's taking the provisions, from state and federal law related to churches, and then also taking into mind, how do you fit churches into a nice little box and have them play nice in the sandbox per se. And again, the way we do that here is neighborhood scale versus community scale. A neighborhood scale church is allowed basically anywhere, and that's based on the number of seats. A community scale within a residential area have to go through a planning board review so that the site plan can be seen by the planning board, and there can be conditions of approval, related to possible impacts. Again, based on the size of the church that was at that location when it was permitted in the early or the mid-2000s, it was a neighborhood scale church. It did not have to come to this board. If this rezoning request is denied, and or if the case is withdrawn and it goes to a new church, then we would have to make those determinations based on how they plan on using it. If it's going to be their sanctuary, what's going to be their seating capacity. If they plan on using it for something else, like a school or a daycare, then they'll have to go through the appropriate approval processes for that. But again, those are kind of the things we'll have to figure out once we, we'll react to an application when it's submitted and guide them accordingly.
And the only small piece that I have to add to this, as a North Carolina licensed commercial real estate broker, you're in a great situation if you have an offer that's approvable and a backup offer. Please trust me when I say neither one may happen.
That's true.
There's nothing here to count on, except what we're responsible for responding to this evening.
All right, great discussion. Any other discussion from the board? If not, what is the pleasure of the board?
I move that the planning board find that the request is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan.
I have a motion by Ms. McRae, a second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That is unanimous.
I further move that the planning board recommend denial of F1626.
I have a motion by Ms. McRae, a second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That is unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, Board, the next case is case B8 F1628.
Before we move forward, can we let the chambers kind of clear?
Yes, that's fine.
And planning board, if you need a 5-minute break while that's taking place, feel free.
You all look great for 75.
Thank you.
I am 75.
As a church.
But I do think going
Chairman, I
forward,
failed to
we're
get
going to
my
see.
address. I realized that in my haste to try to say
that's-
church thing.
Pretty
didn't close this out, did I? Took a break. All right, we're back from our break.
No problem. All right, so we've got F-1628, petitioners Clay Pigeon Properties LLC. Site is 13.71 acres on the north side of Union Cross Road at its intersection with Thomasville Road. This is a general use rezoning from RS20 to RS9. As you can see, this is in the southeastern portion of GMA3, suburban neighborhoods. The site plan has, the location map has a suburb up here to the north, it's RS12, RS20 to the east and to the south. Across 109 is agriculture, and to the west on the other side here is RS9, sort of bracketing all the way up and down to the west. Here's the aerial. There's two single-family residential homes. One's over here on the eastern portion, one's over on the west. Inside's a basically an open field. This is the area plan. This is, as you can see, it's single-family residential. A portion of the property right here is in the large lot residential growth corridor. This is looking north from Union Cross Road. This is the driveway going into the open field. This is looking west onto the subject property. This is looking eastbound onto Union Cross Road. Subject property on the left. This is looking westbound at the NC 109 Union Cross Road intersection. Subject property on the right. And this is looking at the single-family house on the western portion of the property. So this request is consistent with legacy in that it supports a mixture of housing densities. This is a part of the Southeast Suburban Area Plan update, recommends single-family residential land use at this location, and the site does have access to public water and sewer. If you can kind of see where the creek bed is over here in the corner, that's the area where the public sewer's at. Any questions? Oh, and staff does recommend approval.
Yes. Mr. Allred, would you talk about the traffic on Thomasville Road?
Good question. Traffic on Thomasville Road.
What's
Have
your
that
rating?
with me. The density was actually more on Union Cross than it was on
Yeah,
Thomasville
okay,
Road.
well, Union Cross and Thomasville, that whole,
Yeah.
yeah.
So Union Cross Road is over capacity. It's over capacity by, I just want to make sure I tell you right. I apologize, sir. Yeah, so the average daily trip count on Union Cross Road is 17,000. Capacity is at level service D.
At that specific intersection?
It just has that as the capacity for the entire
Or
street.
further south?
We're talking Union Cross Road. So we're
What?
talking east to west.
So it's the entirety of Union Cross Road? Because Cross Road out here is very different than Union Cross Road. That's
why I asked.
No, trip counts are bisected by key block lengths, usually thoroughfare to thoroughfare. So it would, again, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head where it stopped, but it would be the area in front of this site.
Okay.
Yeah, so this
Just
is the
making sure.
entire state and come in through there.
It's
It
not
is-
that long.
Yeah. That's basically, it does take in that section, so that's how it breaks it up by bracket. I'm trying to
Yeah.
figure out exactly where I'm at. I'm almost there.
Yeah,
There we
you're
go.
getting there. Back
Eagle,
up.
Lexington, Thomasville, Union Cross, there we go.
So the Ridgewood Road.
Yeah, so it has it at 17,000. As far as the actual section, it looks like it probably goes to about this road here between the segments.
Looks like Willard Road.
So,
Any questions for?
Well, are there any thoughts from NCDOT that you know of to further help this? I know there are a lot of school children on this road and things like this, and what we're hearing as a proposal is to increase the traffic on an already overloaded road, which is, I wish we could get ahead of development with some of our traffic patterns.
what it talks about is it talks about modernizing Union Cross Road, which modernizing is fairly, it can be a bunch of different things. It can be a difference between an intersection improvement. It could be shoulder width improvements. It could be lane width improvements. But what the MPO and WSDOT has done is they have a section of where roads that need to be modernized, and it has this section of Union Cross as part of that section. But it doesn't go into the exact specifics of what it's talking about. It just says that these projects are up for modernization. So it's just a matter of, it could be adding 2 feet of shoulder on the sides. That's as much as it could be. Generally, when you get a 2-lane road, it's 18-foot wide lanes and 2-foot shoulder, it will usually take the capacity up to around 18,000. I don't know if you remember seeing that with some of your other projects, but I can't tell you exactly what that modernization is, so I'm speculating what it is.
Any additional questions? Thank you. All right, we will have a public hearing on this. Again, each side will have 12 minutes. We have in favor, Brent Cochran. Please, if you will state your name, address, and zip code for the record.
Yes, sir. Brent Cochran. I'm with FEI Civil Engineers and Land Surveyors, 8518 Triad Drive, Colfax, NC, 27235. It is a general use rezoning request from RS20 to R9. I'll save you a lot of it and just kind of get down to the points. The points are that the property owner is currently the developer at this time. There's not a builder that's been chosen for this piece of property, so we're trying to keep maximum flexibility for the potential builder. But we already know that we're going to have significant conversations with NCDOT as we go through this process. To be very clear, to be very frank, I live in Wahlberg. So I drive past this. I went to Ledford, went to Wahlberg. I know this area, I know what we're dealing with. In the end, we're going to have to work through those issues. And all the neighbors that I've heard of since we turned in our petition, we've gone through those conversations with them that have contacted me. So I'm here for any questions that you may have, but it is a general use rezoning at this time.
Thank you.
Excuse me, do you think there are solutions to the traffic there? Is that going to affect your density? Is it going to affect
Yes, sir.
you all investing in the road or what?
Yes, sir. I don't think we'll maximize out to the density that would be allowed with RS9, but I think we're going to have to do things and work closely with DOT as we go into this. It's a very sensitive intersection, but this particular property is not putting all those cars on the road, but I understand that it will be adding to that. But this issue is bigger and broader than just here, but we are a key piece at a key intersection.
Any additional questions? Thank you, Mr. Cochran. How much time do we have left?
10 minutes, 50 seconds.
10 minutes and 50 seconds left. If anyone else is here to speak in support. Seeing no one, I would go to the opposition. We have 2. I think the last name is Klatt for the first one. Ms. Klatt, if you would come and state your name and address and zip code. And then we have Gregory Stelzer.
Good evening. My name is Teresa Klatt. I live at 2535 Union Cross Road, Winston-Salem, 27107. The proposal of the land is diagonally and across the street from me. I've lived on my piece of property. It's a part of a dairy that was established in 1863. My house did not qualify at that time for historical preservation. I tried to do it. I moved to the area because I wanted peace and quiet. As I said, I've lived in this area for a very long time, and I've seen traffic increase. I have a picture on my phone if you would like to see it, just from last night, as to the increase of traffic. It was over a quarter of a mile long. I'm like the 5th house on the right when you come on Union Cross Road. And from that intersection all the way back to Glen Cross Drive was blocked yesterday from a cut through from Ridgewood Road on from 311 and also from Rex on 40. People just use it as a cut through. It's a very dangerous intersection, period, because there's a crest of the hill there and it's very hard to get out, particularly if you want to make a left-hand turn on 109 and head south towards Gumtree Road. There's a lot going on in the area as well. Of course, I'm sure you all are aware, maybe you aren't, of the 109 widening project. They have approved a, I think it was number 5, which is it's taken it really wide, kind of out towards 52. And they're going to tie it back in, right back at Teague Road, which is maybe 5 car lengths from the Union Cross Road intersection that they're talking about. They're also talking about making a cut through back into from the Hunterwood subdivision that is cutting through right in front of my neighbor's house, which is in a very sharp curve there. We've seen several wrecks there just from people going too fast and not realizing that traffic is already backed up. Go there, they've done traffic studies on the roads, but I assure you they haven't been done at peak hours because it's several times a week that I have trouble getting to my own home because of the traffic delays. We've also experienced, in the amount of time I've lived out there, a lot more crime in our area. Everybody in our area has a lot of, everybody has security systems on their houses. With the proposal change, you're proposing to put smaller houses in there that are going to be of less value, okay, to decrease our property values, and therefore possibly, not being discriminative, lower classes of people that we could have problems with, potentially. I hope that you would also consider that what would you do if this was your neighborhood, you know, and you've chosen this to be your forever home, such as somebody mentioned earlier, that you would try and fight for keeping more peace in our area.
Thank you, Ms. Clatt. Any questions for Ms. Clatt before she walks off?
Ms. Clapp, did you feel at all consoled in this by Mr. Cockrum's statement that they're willing to work with this and look at it? But remember that this is already zoned in a way that could be fairly, I don't know how many houses could fit on there, but there'd be quite a few.
Not really, and I'll tell you why. So with the proposal, you're going to increase, let's just say everybody has 2 cars that are moving in. Everybody, single-family houses, husband, wife, whatever, has 2 cars. That's, and there would be 60 houses. That's 132 more cars on the road a day at that end of the road, okay? Then I don't know if you're aware, there is a new proposal. It has been put on hold, and it's between Sawmill Road and Willard Road. There is, it's a site that they're actually considering the Glenmore subdivision, making a cut through to Sawmill Road, and they're proposing, we've already met with everybody, that's proposing over 300 more cars, trip cars on the road every day. So, you know, you're seeing, we're just getting squashed, you know, so no, I don't find any consolation in it.
Okay, thank you.
How much time do we have left?
8.5 minutes.
All right. Mr. Gregory Stelzer. Again, if you would state your name, address, and zip code for the record, please, Mr. Stelzer.
Good evening, Board. I'm Gregory Stelzer, S-T-E-L-Z like zebra, E-R. I live at 3089 Glen Laurel Lane, and I'm in 27107. My home is probably the closest to this planned area. The first concern I have is part of this property has a running watershed area. It's not conducive or allowable to build on it. And since the stream that runs through a certain section of this property curves around to my backyard and goes down to a very, very deep ravine down there, when my home was built as part of the Hunterwood Homes community, which happens to be 85 homes, surrounding a good percentage of this property. I was informed that when I take this property, even though it's part of my property, I'm not allowed to do anything to it. And I was told that it cannot be built on it. So I own it, but I can't do anything with it. And part of that is on this property, which means that it is not fully 100% available for the amount of lots that they intend to use, which means condensing down. I don't know if the board was aware of this watershed area that runs through this property, not all of it, but a certain percentage of it. And of course, there's the horrible story of where Thomasville Road intersects and dead ends at the western terminus of Union Cross Road. And it is a harrowing situation because Hunterwood Homes comes right out by that intersection. As crazy as it sounds, one time I couldn't make a left-hand turn to go down Thomasville Road to the closest and only shopping center, which is Wahlberg Shopping Center, south on Thomasville Road, because of the traffic. So I had to turn right and go north on Thomasville Road over a mile to find a place that I could get around from an open space to make a U-turn to go back down. So I had to do in total 2 miles to go down further down Thomasville Road. The intersection is intolerable. I don't know if a traffic study has been proposed to the board or that it is known, but adding more homes to this Union Cross Thomasville Road intersection, which fronts along the majority of this property, is really a fool's errand until a proper traffic study is done. It's not a livable place to enjoy your home. And adding these properties to a property that has part of it that's not even fully usable with a watershed area running through it. Like I had mentioned, you can't build on it, you can't do anything to it. It's the law. So I'm saying there has to be great consideration of going ahead with this project. I mean, everyone likes nice homes, and Hunterwood Homes is a great place to live. I've been there for 21 years, never had a complaint about it. But the whole point is, with any intentions of running a street from this property through into Hunterwood Homes is a disaster. They're not wide streets in Hunterwood Homes. And many times for my own self, since I'm at the dead end of the street, the last house on that street, when people who have 4 cars who don't use their driveway or can't use their driveway, sometimes there's a car on the right, there's a car on the left, and I have to weed through to get out on my own street. So putting a through street from another development into Hunterwood Homes is another disaster. I'm just asking consideration from the board to know that we've got major problems already, and please don't make another disaster by approving this piece of property that really is of no benefit to the future of the community.
Are there any questions? Thank you so very much.
Thank you, sirs, ladies.
How much time is left?
3 minutes.
We have 3 minutes left. If anyone else would like to speak in opposition.
I live with Mr. Stelzer at that address.
If you could give your name for the record.
David Long, 3089 Glen Laurel Lane, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27107. I can reiterate what Mr. Stelzer said about having to actually exit Chestnut Heights Road and wanting to go back toward the left and having to instead go back to the right and turn around and come back many times. Also, I want the property owners of this proposed development to know, also in that watershed, there are many old growth trees. I cringe every time there is a heavy rainstorm for fear those trees are going to fall on property. And not just our property, but also other properties. So there are a lot of old growth trees that need to be dealt with if this area is going to be developed.
Thank you.
2.5 minutes.
We have 2.5 minutes left. If anyone else is here to speak in opposition. Nope, all right. That's no problem. I saw you. I made eye contact. All right. Seeing no one, I would close the public hearing. Would the board like to have a conversation or make a motion?
Does the staff know of anything of watershed or anything that would limit development in there?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Bryan, Mr. Chairman, board, again, what I'm assuming what the citizen mentioned is the fact there is a stream that runs through that northeast corner of the property there at Glen Laurel Lane.
Can you point that out?
Yeah, just in that location there. And part of that stream does cross that property. You see it right there.
Yep.
Obviously there are limitations on what you can build in a stream. There aren't limitations. There are limitations of what you can do crossing a stream, but generally speaking, that's dealt with through the Army Corps of Engineer, essentially as far as like doing a crossing, and depending on the amount of disturbance you have, you either get, you're either covered under what's called a national permit, or you have to get an individual permit. An individual permit, you have to do remediation and other things, et cetera, et cetera. This isn't a water supply watershed. This isn't, there could be wetlands there, but again, whenever you cross a stream, there are things that you have to do in order to do that. Glen Laurel Lane, again, if this property is rezoned from RS20 to RS9, Glen Laurel Lane will be extended as long as it is practical to do so. If this property isn't rezoned to RS9, it remains RS20, but someone puts a subdivision on here, Glen Laurel Lane will be extended if it's practical to do so from a connectivity standpoint. So the actual action of rezoning the property is immaterial to whether or not that street gets extended. Again, I would say, in reaction to some of the comments that were made, if Glen Laurel Lane were extended into this project and this project exits out on Union Cross Road, you'd be able to take a left on Union Cross Road, go down and take a right on Willard Road, and come out much further on Old Thomasville, where you perhaps would be able to make a left turn. Again, I'm not trying to make light of the concern. I'm just saying that's one of the reasons why we have and encourage interconnectivity, is to be able to make those movements different ways depending upon the time of the day and the circumstances of traffic. So, to answer the question at hand, I'm not aware of any watershed per se. I think it's the stream that was referred to.
It could be a floodplain too. You just can't do anything with it because it's in a floodplain.
All right, would anyone like to make a motion?
I move the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
I have a motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That is unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, I further move the planning board recommend approval of F1628.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yes.
One opposed. It does pass.
Mr. Chairman, that brings us to our last item of the agenda for the day. Our last case, I should say, and that's case B10, that's UDO CC22, and we will hear from Heather Bratlin on that, dealing with HRC categorical appointment changes to the UDO.
Good evening. The Historic Resources Commission is also turning 75 this year, so we are happy to share a birthday with you all. It was one of the first things the planning board did after it was created later in the year. So I'm here tonight for UDO CC22. The Planning and Development Services staff is the petitioner, and the request is to amend Chapter 10 of the Unified Development Ordinances to modify the structure of the Forsyth County Historic Resources Commission. In 2022, the city manager's office directed staff to explore revisions to the membership structure to provide greater opportunities for diversity on the commission and to allow the commission to better reflect the communities that it represents. The commission is a 12-member board with 5 members appointed by the City of Winston-Salem, 5 appointed by Forsyth County, 1 member appointed by the Village of Clemens, and 1 member appointed by the Town of Kernersville. Currently, the city appointees are 1 at-large member and 4 categorical members. The categorical seats are based on residence location and professional qualifications. So we have 1 seat reserved for members, residents, of an H district, which would either be Old Salem or Bethabara. 1 seat reserved for residents of a historic overlay district, which would be the West End. 1 seat reserved for an archaeologist, landscape architect, arborist, planner, or surveyor, and 1 for an architectural historian or historic preservationist. This is a survey that we did of 8 commissions in peer communities. Some of our peer communities have 2 commissions, 1 for the county and then 1 for areas where they have historic districts. But you'll see that our closest peers in Guilford County and the city of Greensboro don't have any professional categorical seats. And in fact, Durham is the only other peer community that has categorical seats that are based on professional qualifications. The North Carolina general statutes do require that a majority of our members on the commission have a demonstrated special interest, experience, or education in history, architecture, archaeology, or related fields. And they will continue to govern our membership, obviously. Our request is to change the archaeologist, landscape architect, arborist, planner, or surveyor seat and the architectural historian or historic preservationist seat into 2 at-large seats. The commission recommended this change after discussion at our July 2022 retreat, and the proposed change was presented at the Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee meeting as an information item in October of 2022. So again, this proposed amendment will convert the 2 professional categorical seats into at-large seats to enlarge the pool of potential applicants and hopefully increase membership diversity. It will bring the HRC into line with membership structure in our peer communities, and the amendment will have no impact on current members in those professional categorical seats. Their terms will expire in November of 2023 and June of 2026. And staff's recommendation is approval.
So are you looking to increase to 13?
No. No, it'll still be 5 appointees from the city of Winston-Salem.
Right.
So instead of having 4 at categorical seats and 1 at-large seat, it will be 2 categorical seats and 3 at-large seats, which matches the county's appointments also. Currently, the city is very hamstrung by having so many categorical seats, and the county has more at-large seats.
What was the 8? I missed that. I thought there was a reference to an 8.
There are, in the actual UDO text amendment, we would go from having, I should say, 8 at-large seats, because the seats that are appointed by Kernersville and Clemens are also at-large seats, and then 4 categorical seats.
But wouldn't the less hamstrung county appointees and Kernersville and Clemens appointees balance out the more hamstrung City of Winston-Salem appointees?
I would say not really, because currently our commission is 11 of our members are white, 1 is African American. And we are looking to increase both our racial diversity, but also diversity of where people live and so on. And the population in Winston-Salem tends to be more racially diverse than the population in the surrounding county and small towns, which is where the county appointments, where they try to make the appointments from. And so that won't so much help us achieve the racial diversity that we're looking for. Geographic diversity, yes, but not racial diversity necessarily.
But the overall commission functions as 1 commission of
Correct.
Appointees from everywhere. And it just for the record, the mission of the Historic Resources Commission is what?
The primary work that we do is issuing certificates of appropriateness for our regulated local historic districts and local historic landmarks, which is why Old Salem, Bethabara, and West End have seats on the commission, because those are the neighborhoods that we regulate. So if you want to change your windows, if you want to change your siding or your roof or change the color of something, you have to come and get a certificate of appropriateness from staff. But that's such a small component of the historic resources in the county. And that's one of the things that we're looking to do is actually increase the tools we have in our toolbox so that we can offer services to more parts of the city and county where maybe we don't want to go in and regulate your neighborhood, but we want to help you recognize that your community is historic and significant. And so this is looked at as a way to help us interface with those communities because we'll have more seats. So people that live in those communities that may not necessarily have the professional qualifications could be appointed to them.
But there's no limitation on any of those professional qualifications based on any kind of protected class, right?
No.
So there's no prohibition against diverse surveyors, architects, archaeologists, planners?
No. So we will continue to have a seat for an architect, but like I can tell you that there are only 2 African-American licensed architects in Forsyth County. So, you know, unless it's going to be one of those 2 people, last time we had an architect seat open, we actually actively tried to recruit one of those 2 people, and we're not successful. So it really does limit us in terms of finding new membership.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bryan, I think you said earlier, and I may be off, but Old Salem was changing from something to private?
No. The thing with Old Salem had to do with the original, that 75-year
okay,
thing.
got you, okay.
Yeah,
Then I don't need to ask.
Yeah, I know it's probably too late in the process to do it, but I think the one categorical position that I've seen is really needed on the HRC is a lawyer. Because of its quasi-judicial nature, it strays so often from what it should be doing and the kinds of questions and discussions that it should be having, that it would really behoove the city and county to have a lawyer to sort of draw them back in and explain to them the quasi-judicial nature of what's going on.
We do have.
I know you have your city
We have
lawyer
Jerry
there,
Contos
but-
at every meeting, and he does a good job of letting the commission know when they have gotten outside of their realm of influence and their sphere of decision-making. And, you know, and staff as well tries to bring them back into line with what it is they should be doing and the issues they can consider.
I guess my concern is just that, to me, I'm 100% in favor of having a diverse historic resources commission. I think that there are varying viewpoints throughout this community that need to be represented. I think the way this is currently set up tends to do that, and I think that while there may only be a certain number of African-American architects in Winston-Salem, there are certainly a plethora of female architects, and if our real goal here is diversity, that means diversity of gender and community and where you live, all those type things. And I think this almost presumes that certain subgroups of people can't serve in professional roles or wouldn't serve in professional roles, or, you know, I mean, I think we're getting away from the goal of this commission, which is to be good stewards of the historic resources, of all the historic resources in this county and city, for a goal that could be accomplished in other ways. So that's just my personal opinion.
Right. Again, I certainly can't. I mean, I can't disagree with your opinion and your sentiment. What I would say again is that, you know, what we have found, and I believe again, what we, you know, again, in looking at our peers, we are out of line compared to our peer communities, except for the town of or city of Durham, in having professional categorical appointments. They're the only other entity that does. So again, that does artificially deflate the pool of folks, because you have to look for that particular subset or, you know, certification or degree or license. So you're automatically narrowing your pool. And again, if you're trying to strive for a diverse board, if you're artificially reducing the pool from which you can pull from, it makes it more difficult to fill those seats. The other thing that I would say, and again, I can't speak to, I know it's the 75th year, I can't speak to past all past staffs going back years and decades. I can speak to the professional staff that we have had over my course of the 22 years that I've been here. And I will say, by and large, I would put our professional staff up against the historic resources staff anywhere, not just in the state, but the country, as far as the knowledge and the skills and the abilities and, the thoughtfulness they bring to their jobs. And I say that because, again, I think it's important when you have a professional staff. I think, perhaps some of the reasons why we had categorical appointments in the past could have been to fill some voids that we perhaps didn't have from a staff perspective. With the staff that we have, I feel like we have a lot of those tools, and this is just another avenue by which to broaden the pool. So again, not saying what the county's goals are, but if the county has 3 at-large appointments and the city only has 1, and the county isn't necessarily cognizant of being more representative, whereas the city is, again, when you only have 1 at-large seat and you have a stated goal that you want to be diverse and you want to appoint folks that represent a diversity of race and gender and sexuality and experience and geographic location, without the change, I think, again, you are heightening more and more of that pool. And again, that was kind of the discussions we had internal amongst staff. And then, again, that's been going on for a couple of years. I know this came out of something from, the spring and summer of 22, but we've kind of had those internal discussions over time about how we can increase diversity. We got direction to try to do that, and this is the tool that we've come up with. So, again, all that being said, I certainly appreciate where you're coming from, but that's just kind of a little bit of additional context that I would say is kind of how we've ended up where we have with the recommendation that we have.
And just shooting from the hip, if I were on staff and I wanted to protect historic resources and I wanted more specifically racial diversity on the commission, I'd walk into those neighborhoods and say, we're here to help protect the history and culture of your neighborhood. You'd get volunteers.
Well, I'm so glad that you made that comment because
I'm sorry, I don't think it's overly complicated.
At the end of 2022, the commission actually established a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee who is focusing on doing just that. So the membership of that committee actually will have more members from the public than commission members, and that is exactly what that committee is doing. So we can go out into neighborhoods and meet with people and say, what's important to you? What can we offer you? What do you care about? What can we protect?
I really appreciate it because I think diversity of any magnitude has to be intentional. And if you're not intentional about it, you can inadvertently overlook any class.
Absolutely.
Right now, you're governing 3 neighborhoods that don't reflect a great deal of diversity.
That is absolutely correct. So we are
perhaps.
Yeah, I would rather see some geographical effort to pull in representatives of other parts of the county or the city and build your diversity that way, because those people have a vested interest in preserving the history of where they live, right?
So one of the things, and Mr. Bryan being so involved with the West End, can speak to this perhaps, but we work on a neighborhood initiated process. So someone has, a neighborhood has to come in and say, we want your rules. If Castle Heights walked in tomorrow and said, we want to be a historic overlay district and we want your rules, staff would be super excited about that. But not many neighborhoods are asking for that. Now, Charlotte, that's a different story because they have so much development pressure that they are seeing their local historic districts. They have like 15 now. We aren't experiencing that so much in Winston-Salem, which is why we're trying to develop new tools to offer to help recognize some of these neighborhoods that may say, we're not ready for your rules yet, but we want to be recognized. We want people to know about us. And that's, again, part of what the DEI committee is trying to do is get diverse. We have somebody who just joined us who is a farmer that lives out off Germantown Road and somebody who lives on Patterson Avenue. And those are areas of the county and city that we've worked in, but we haven't had representation from.
And sometimes encroachment makes neighborhoods come together.
Absolutely.
I think
You
too,
can see that tonight.
we're putting a lot on racial diversity. One of the things, right, like, I want to be very clear that taking the professional categories away might do is actually promote the next Jane Jacobs. I hope he or she or whoever comes from Winston. Like, it's intimidating sometimes to have these professional categories, and then it creates its own barrier. And so sometimes it's diversity of viewpoint that is also equally as important as diversity of race or like equity. And so I think this is an easier kind of thing to view, like, okay, 3 at-large seats. I trust you guys. Pick responsible people, right?
Well, it's your elected officials who pick them. We don't pick them.
Okay, well, I mean, elected officials pick responsible people to manage our neighborhoods and preserve the parts of Winston that we want to keep.
Yeah, I don't want any of my comments to be taken as if I don't think diversity is important, at risk of trying to qualify myself for the position Mr. Bryan is envisioning. If I'm passionate about anything other than real estate, it's history. And so I want to see history preserved, and diversity encouraged, but not one at the expense of the other, I guess is my concern. And so that's,
Absolutely.
I will not fill Mr. Bryan's imaginary seat on the commission. So.
May I move approval?
I know there's no one here to speak, but we do need to hold a public hearing.
Is anyone here in opposition to this proposal? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
I move the planning board recommend approval of UDO CC22.
I have a motion by Mr. Lamb. Is second?
I'll second it.
Second by Ms. McRae. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposes?
No.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Board, that brings us to the staff report. I promise you I'm going to be brief. I will turn to Kirk first for work session.
All right, in an effort to be brief as well, I'll just list these. We're going to have 3 items. The first is a report on accessory dwelling units approved in the past year since City Council adopted revised ADU standards that this board heard as well. The second item is a current issue of the 10-year downtown investment report that Steve Smotherman presents to you every March or so. And the last is a non-substantive cleanup text amendment, the first we've done of the UDO Clear Code, which you all may have a hard time believing this, but it's been 3 years and a few months since that went into effect. So we've got a few things that we want to clean up on that, and we'll share those at the work session.
Mr. Chairman of the Board, next I'll turn to Brian, who will go over your lengthy April Planning Board meeting.
So I will say, we don't have to go back to how things used to be, where there were 4 and 5 hour meetings. But thank you. That's your commercial break.
Mr. Chairman, I would have to agree with you there. I don't know if pace is going to continue, but we certainly have a smattering of different requests coming in, 22 total items. A couple of those were from today, continued cases, 12 new rezoning requests, 14 total. One elected body SUP for a transmission tower, 1 final development plan, 4 planning board reviews, 2 total subdivisions, but only one of them is new. And then finally, the text amendment that Kirk was mentioning. We do have quite a caseload next month, but we'll try to make it as easy as we can for you.
Mr. Chairman Board, I will say, again, kind of looking at this, those 12 new cases that kind of walked in the door, for some reason, it's kind of a coalescence of about 5 or 6 months worth of discussions we've had with amongst different folks, and they all kind of came in the door at the same time. Hopefully we won't, again, I want us to have a nice caseload. I don't want us to be overloaded because it is a staff issue as well. I don't think that this volume will be the norm.
procedurally, is there a way when, like, we have some of these that are cases that were continued from today, is there a way to make them have to wait an extra month to, you can't do that because of advertising and everything else?
Well, not just the advertising, it's basically whenever something walks in the door, there is a certain amount of time it has to go to the elected body, and you can't continue it but so many times. And so there's not really an easy path forward for us to do that. The next item I have is, I'll just go over Forward 2045 real quick. We've continued to do engagement with boards and commissions. We're going out to stakeholder and community groups soon, including the Rotary Club of Kernersville, sometime, I believe, the end of this month or beginning of April. And we do now have a signed contract with MetroQuest, which is what our survey platform will be done on. We actually had a meeting on that last week, and we are working on putting that survey together. We are also working with marketing and communications on an aggressive marketing campaign behind that and just Forward 2045 generally. So again, we will provide you maybe a little more detailed update at your work session on that. The last thing I will say is I do want to point out and let you know that Nick Smith on our staff, who's here, was recently internally promoted to a project planner. So his planner position, we will be advertising, and along with a number of other positions, we are in the process of filling those positions. We're actually going to put those out generally to a national search because we're having a difficult time, just like everyone else is, in finding qualified applicants locally to apply for our jobs. I will say we also, this week, Emily Jones on our staff, came to our staff. She's a new GIS project planner. She took Kevin Edwards' place, who went to work for the town of High Point, city of High Point. Anyway, she started this week, and she's going to be a great addition to our team. And with that, I'm finished with staff report.
So I'd like to thank Shelley for giving the board new pens after 75 years. Everyone used their pen today, as opposed to throwing it down.
Shelley knows how to earn longevity.
Is there anything else for the good of the order?
Move adjournment.
All right.
I was worried without Brenda here we weren't going to be able to leave.